Hey, Harpslingers, welcome to the Harpslinger Podcast, where each and every week we hang out with the greatest harmonica players in the music business. If you're watching this on the Facebook page, the Honer Music Facebook page, we hope that you'll go down to the bottom of the chat, share that on your own personal page. I say that every week, but hey, it's worth it. Spread the word about all these wonderful harmonica players we're having on the show each week. And if you didn't know already, you can go to the Harpslinger YouTube channel, and we have an incredible backlog there. This will be our 31st episode. All of your favorite harmonica players are there. In fact, if there's not one there that you'd like to hear from, please let me know. Drop me a line on Facebook or they're on YouTube, and I'll do my best to get them on the show. All right, y'all. We have a big one this week, and I'm super excited. My next guest was a founding member of the legendary Boston-based Geils Band, and is possibly most famous for his fiery performance of Whammer Jammer, which he once said he hopes he plays until he dies. It stands alone as one of the great harmonica songs of all time, and he as one of the greatest harmonica players to ever play the instrument. Folks, here he is, Magic Dick and his lickin' stick. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, thanks, and I really appreciate that nice introduction you did. Thanks a lot.
Oh, yeah, well, thank you for being here. It's as I said before we pushed record, this is a huge honor. You know, it's a real pleasure for me each week to sit down. You know, due to COVID, I was on the road. I was in Europe on March 12th, caught the last flight out of Munich to get back to the States. I was with my band. We had a big tour planned. It was starting great, and COVID smacked us around a little bit, and I've been off the road ever since. So I needed something that I could do that was fulfilling, and this has been it. You know, I've been able to hang out with all of these wonderful harmonica greats like yourself each week. So it's an honor to have you here. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I know that I have students now, and I love to teach, and been doing this for a while. And I'm sure you probably feel the same way that doing this podcast that you're doing, talking about all this stuff, getting a lot of different perspectives. That is one of the best things you can do for growth at whatever level, no matter what level you're at, and no matter what kind of musician you are, no matter what instrument you play, And always remember this, especially when it comes to harp. It's going to set some of the theme for today. The most important thing in regards to harp playing is your voice. The breath control involved with singing is the secret to getting the best sound out of a harp, the best tone, the best attack, the best everything.
I agree.
And one thing I just let me get this one thing out, get this off me, is that, and I'm not pointing fingers here. This is a blanket statement about most harp players. I'm not talking about the tip-top cream of the crop guys. That's all an individual thing. And plus, I don't know that much about them. But what I do know is that in general, a lot of harmonica players don't need harp lessons anywhere near as much as they need music lessons. And right here is where 50% of the people are going to go or either fall asleep or leave. And please don't, because I have a lot to say about this. And it's a really important thing to me. So if nobody else cares about this, I don't care, but I'm going to get this out. All right.
Absolutely. I think it's important. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think a lot of us are we're always striving for growth, and we're not sure how to get it. I think a lot of folks aren't even really sure how to practice. I think that is,
like to talk about that too.
Yeah. So, it's, I think you're right. I think a lot of the folks that are tuning into the Harpslinger podcast, first of all, I think are from all skill levels. So, I'm sure
that's great.
They're going to be chiming in on the chat right now. I hope they are, commenting on their feelings on this. And I'm going to want to ask you eventually, how much theory is enough theory? I want to actually, if I may, I'd like to go back just a little bit and sort of get a little background on you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
I'd love to know. I always ask everybody a few of the same questions when I start out, because I always wonder, did you come from a musical family?
There's an old Louis Armstrong too. from the late 20s, early 30s, something about, I forget the exact title, but something about I come from a musical family, which I think in his particular case, he sort of didn't, but you know, sorry, I got a little off track there, but reel me back in.
Anything about Louis Armstrong? Yeah, I'm just curious. What were your early influences as far as, like, I know you started with brass instrument, with trumpet, I believe, right? Added saxophone to that list early, like, and in like third grade, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's the most important thing about me.
right.
It's the most important thing to understand about me. If you want to know how I developed my harp playing the way I did, what I care about, and what I use as a reference, you know, a reference model of a certain kind of quality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not interested in the quality that most harmonica players get. That's not good enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in trumpet players, sax players, you know, the real deal jazz heroes,
Mm-hmm.
And the way they play. That's what I'm interested in developing the most. Now, all along the way, yes, I played rock and roll and rock and a lot of blues,
Mm-hmm.
and still do and still would. But all along, my real desire has been Louis Armstrong, Roy Eldridge, Dizzy Gillespie, Fats Navarro, Miles Davis.
Mm-hmm.
This is it for me.
Yeah.
Charlie Parker, of course, Dexter Gordon.
Yes.
I mean, the list could go on and on. These are players that I truly love and study in some detail, you know, to try to, basically what I'm doing is I'm taking these guys as my musical idols, my musical models, and figuring out what is it that each one of them has, regardless of their, you know, whether they're trumpet or sax, clarinet, voice. What do all of those have in common that applies to the harp? And what it is, and I'm certain about this, what it is its breath control.
Mm-hmm.
But it's breath control, when most players hear somebody mention about breath control, they think, well, of course you got to have breath control to play the harp. I'm talking about levels of breath control that are way beyond what most people are thinking of. Mm-hmm. And yet it derives directly. I go directly to vocal mechanics. I go directly to those things which you actually can work on and control. Like, I've been fortunate enough to have some voice lessons, quite a few, going back to starting in the 90s,
right,
early 90s, when I was doing blues time. And the more I did these vocal exercises, which are great, by the way, and I recommend to anybody who should study with a vocal coach. Mm-hmm. If you're a wind instrument player, I couldn't recommend it more highly, because the point here is to draw your attention to the inception of the tone. And the way to get a handle on that without a lot of technical talk is to realize that the mere utterance of speech, when most players speak better than they play. And part of the problem there is that they don't direct their attention to what is the airstream doing the moment you intend to make a sound. Mm-hmm. Once you learn through practice to direct your attention to this, and this is not just a simple matter of, well, direct your attention to it. No, you direct your attention to it by a combination of doing things that can take some considerable period of time, like, right, like vocalizing, and then observing what's happening with the airstream when you do certain things, and realizing that the two things, the best thing that you can do to get into the detail of breath control is to sing, because that's exactly what is required of the airstream to produce the sounds that I do. So if you're interested in, if you hear something coming from me and you go, why is it that each note he hits just sounds so different from most players? It's because of this, you know, and I'm saying this not because I think I'm better, although I do believe this is a better approach than what most people do in general. You know, it's not that I'm better than anybody. It's just that I figured some shit out.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Oh,
You know, and I figured it out, not just from thinking about it. I figured it out through real experience, you know, the real experience of studying some singing, focusing on the breath control, and realizing that this thing of like just telling somebody to go, hey, if you see somebody about to steal your car, you're in your house, you're looking out your window, and somebody's monkeying around with your car. You don't know who that person is. You think they're going to try to steal your car. What do? You're going to open your window. You're going to go, hey. Well, hey.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. You do hey into the harp, like on a blow, you know.
Yeah.
Hey. And then the secret of the draw thing is to do a mental trick where, yes, you're drawing air in, you're changing the wind direction, just like a violinist changes the direction of the bow. But the action needs to be the same.
Right.
If you want to play like a jazz player, if you want to play like a singer, you need to work on making things smooth, you know. And a lot of the times, if you play jazz heads, I love working on bebop heads. Bebop is actually my favorite music.
Okay.
And I'm talking specifically bebop from 1945, 46, 47. I was born in 45. Somehow or other, this zeitgeist of music got into my mother's womb. I don't think she was sitting at home with the radio on listening to Charlie Parker. It was more likely she was listening to polkas, you know.
Right.
You know.
There's merit there too, I suppose, right?
Yeah. But I think the musical aspect of my thing, I think a lot of it comes from my mother. My mother really loved music. Mm-hmm. My father did too, but he didn't pay as much attention to it as my mom did. And she would sing in the choir, mm-hmm. you know, at the temple.
Yeah.
And mentioning the temple, by the way, brings to mind another part of my background, which is when I was growing up, I have a brother who's 4 years older than me. He played clarinet. So the two of us would play these duets together. We had this book of Freilachs, okay. And, you know, Eastern European Jewish music. Okay. There's a whole Eastern European zone that draws heavily from this combination of Arabic, Jewish, you know. So those scales, those sounds, those bent notes, if you want, like, I found myself starting to be directly influenced by this in a rock context, for example, on a tune that we do with the Geils Band called "I'm Getting Out," okay. Where I'm playing the solo section is on it's a one chord minor thing. A lot of times I would have to play to a one chord vamp, and a lot of times they would be a minor vamp.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And in the particular instance of that song, "I'm Getting Out," I used a harmonic minor tuning, which to me at the time that I used it was new to my experience. I had it in my collection, like when I first bought harps to become a harp player and really get into it. I bought everything, you know. I bought whatever Hohner had except the tremolos. I wasn't really interested in tremolo harps, you know. But everything else, all the various diatonic models, the the bass harp, the 48 chord harp, all of it. I still fool around with it. I love the chord harp. And I'm going to recommend right now that for those players out there who want to delve more, who want to delve more into the music theory and go from it being theoretical to something you actually hear. Because there's a big difference. Once you grasp these chord changes in terms of what this sounds like, then you have a much better grasp of, like, you can look at a chart of, well, here's the chord changes to this thing. You can start to follow these changes.
Sure.
But if you then go to a chord instrument, get a chord instrument in your hands. Now, for me, keyboard is no good because it's okay to go to a piano's great for go to the piano and look and try and experiment, watch and listen.
Sure.
It's great for that. But to actually play doesn't work good for me.
Yeah.
It could. If I continued to direct my attention to it, I think it would. But like so many things, we're all pretty busy, and it's like, you need to be economical about what you spend your time and energy on, so I try to be careful with this and make sure that everything I'm directing my attention to builds like a pyramid, builds one thing upon another. So the chord harp for me, once I started to mess around with the chord harp and play some standards and some jazz changes, which you can do actually pretty cool on the chord harp. There's ways to get voicings out of it that aren't so square.
Okay. Yeah.
Playing split chords on it, which is quite a technique.
Yeah.
But I recommend to anybody who could do this, get yourself a chord harp. Okay. But they're expensive.
Right on. I've never played a chord harp. I have to check that out. Yeah.
You ever seen it?
I'm not so sure I actually have seen it.
Well, it's about 2.5 feet long.
This is some Harmonica Cats stuff, right? Harmonica?
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
In fact, that player in the Harmonica Cats, Alfieri, is an incredible musician, and he's the best chord harp player I've ever heard.
Wow.
I never had the pleasure of meeting him, but I did meet Jerry Murad and got a little bit close with Jerry. And that was a great experience, absolutely. Because Jerry Murad is sort of broadly speaking, he's my real idol on the chromatic harp.
Okay.
Because of the wider variety of bags that he can play, beautiful ballads playing that'll make you cry, swing, folk, all kinds of stuff. Jerry Murad to me was just awesome.
Yeah.
I met him in around 1972. We were playing a gig up in I think it was Portland or Seattle, and the hotel we were staying at might have been a Hyatt or something like that. And we were coming back from doing a gig, coming back that evening, and in the bar lounge was Jerry Murad and the Harmonica Cats. And Jay loved them too, Jay Geils. And so we just went in and, right away and didn't even go to our room. We just watched this. And then afterwards I hung around and got to talk to Jerry. He took me up to his room, showed me this incredible suitcase that he had, this fairly good size leather suitcase that was full of harp tools. We're not talking about the little kit here.
Right. Sounds like it. Yeah.
Jerry Murad could build a harp from scratch. That's how good he was in terms of the mechanics of the instrument, and how much he was involved in the development of changes that were made to the chromatic at Hohner. Of course, the story of the relationship between Jerry Murad and all the other great art players, their relationship with Hohner is something we shouldn't get into.
I think that I think every corporation probably goes through some tough times. Right now, they have a wonderful group of people there that are super supportive of artists. So that's been really, yeah. But
yeah, and I'm still a Honer guy when it comes to the harps. I love Honer harps,
yeah,
which is not to say that I don't like others,
right.
because there are many other good harps around too.
Mhm.
The Seidel's, Suzuki,
Yeah,
and more.
yeah,
It's amazing. When I started, there was only one thing,
yeah.
and that one thing went bad fast.
Yeah. You weren't into soaking your? Were you soaking your reed to get the combs to
Well,
swell?
when I first started out, I was playing marine bands, and like most people who start out, they hear about this thing of, hey man, if you soak your harps,
Yeah.
they'll play a lot better. Yeah, so I fooled around with that and tried that. But what they don't tell you is, uh, soaking your harps is a bad move, because then you're going to have to soak them all the time.
Yeah.
After they dry out, they're no good until you soak them again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I quit that. I quit doing that after a week or two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just it just didn't make a lot of sense. And I thought, this isn't actually really necessary. But back then, the harps were really leaky and terrible.
Mhm.
And so around 1975, 76, I switched to Golden Melodies.
Yeah.
The reason I switched to them was because they were a lot more airtight and played a lot better.
Mhm.
But what I didn't like about the Golden Melody at the time was the tuning of the draw chord.
Okay.
Mostly, the draw chord being much more equal tempered tuning on the chord, made a very rough sounding draw chord for that's not what you'd want to use for a lot of Chicago blues kind of style.
Right. Exactly.
However, for other forms of music, including rock, it actually worked quite well,
Mhm.
particularly if you were playing mostly single note lines, not relying on playing harmonies on the harp.
Mhm.
So,
I'm
like I said, I, I know I jump around from a lot of different things, but the reason I'm doing this partly is because I want to show how everything is of one piece, at least with me.
Mhm.
I have a reason for everything that I do in regards to the harp,
Yeah.
and I don't spend much time just fooling around anymore. Like, I get down to it a lot.
Right. Right.
That's my expression for, it's time to really like work on this. It's time to really practice it. It's like I'd say, I'll get down to it,
Mhm.
which is quoted on, it's a quote from me on one of the live recordings.
I-
But I used to say that a lot and still do, because, and I think that way because, it's time to get down to business. What does it mean to get down to business? It means to be real clear on details and to focus on details. And like when you practice, the way to practice is, well, there are several different ways to practice. But when it comes to technique, I really get the microscope out. This is where people go,
This is the
but
good.
they shouldn't,
This is the
because they should learn to get their own microscope out. They should learn how to listen to their own playing and go and ask themselves, do you like that?
right.
You like that? You want to sound like that next week?
Right. Yeah. I'm with you.
See, I'm through all this. I never want to sound like that again.
Yeah. Yes, and recording yourself doing that, that's the best way
Yeah,
to do it. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, you really have to take responsibility for getting down to it.
That's right. That's right.
And there's not a lot of joy in being a harp player if you just dilettante it.
Right. It gets
You
old
know,
quick, right?
yeah, but that's just me. I'm not saying everybody needs to be serious. I mean, there's also a case to be made for shitty harp playing.
Okay.
Think of how many movies
Oh,
incorporate and want crappy harmonica playing.
Totally. Or you step into the studio and you're like, oh, I love being in the studio. I can't wait to like, play some really cool stuff today. And you do. And they're like, can you just make this really simple sort of like maybe sort of Bob Dylan-ish sort of thing going on, and I love Bob Dylan. Don't get me wrong. But
Yeah, so do I. Bob Dylan's a whole subject that we could dwell on a bit, but yeah,
yeah, yeah, it's disheartening at times, but I feel what you're saying, and I've gone through the same thing when I'm getting ready for a tour. You mentioned chord instruments. I'm
yeah,
first of all, I'm a vocalist first, so I
yeah,
totally relate to everything you were talking about being a singer or learning to sing and using the breath as support. Everything happens on the breath, and so I'm a firm believer in that. But harp is my sort of like my secondary instrument other than the voice. But I also play guitar. That's my chordal thing. But I'm not a very good guitar player. But I have to play quite a bit of it on the road, and
yeah,
so I'm getting the microscope at it, as you say, and I'm practicing just the guitar to a metronome, and then I'm adding the vocal and I'm recording it the whole time and playing it back after each take, and I'm like, it's amazing the cringe effect, you know,
yeah.
that is immediate. It's like, oh my god, that's what I sound. I'm glad I'm doing this because if I sound like that when I get to the gig, I'm going to be in big trouble. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Most harp players won't record themselves on a daily or every other day basis. Um,
I think
Partly because it's probably too disappointing.
yeah, it is. I think singers are the same way, and it's such a personal thing, and
Yeah,
it feels like to me an extension, as you said it's an extension of the voice. It's super personal. I feel.
yeah. The voice rules,
Yeah.
and for me, the voice rules even uh, in the concept of uh, the instrumental concept. In other words, like for me, I like music that has melodies that you can sing. Even if it's these jazz bebop players, you can sing their lines.
Yeah.
That's what I like. No matter what instrument it is, I want to hear stuff that is fundamentally sung, whether it's a voice or not.
Hmm.
There's something about the conception of, the type of lines that have um, scalar motion combined with stepwise motion. This is the kind of line constructions that talk, that swing.
Do you find that I do this, and Mickey Raphael said that he does this too. Uh, if I'm trying to come up with parts, uh, I will, if I have the time, I will sing them, like I will scat them to the
Yeah,
track and see where it takes me, and I'll use that sort of as a foundation instead of where I'm going to go when I pick up the harp. It's amazing how quickly you can transfer that to vocalizing that to putting it through the harp, and
yeah.
that's the end goal, right? To be able to do that at on the spot. I think.
Well, the other thing is like the voice and directing your attention to the singing aspect of all this and singing on the instrument. This is the best way to develop your ear, this ear training thing.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of people get scared with this, this ear training. Um, Ear training is nothing more than paying attention
Right.
to details. Asking yourself, what is this interval? Bum 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 ba bum bum. That's 1 4 1 5 1 6. Now, how did I learn that? Because I learned this song called Blue Room that a lot of the jazz greats played this ballad.
Mhm.
Miles plays beautifully on it from like the 50s or early 60s.
Yeah.
Um, and you realize that it's this kind of songwriting with those clear intervals, even sometimes detached, where it's so perfectly clear.
Hmm.
So if you were to play that line on the harp, that thing I was just singing, if you were to play that, what I do is I direct my attention to, do these intervals really sound right? do they sound like they would sound if they were sung by a great singer with good pitch?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, that's what's needed. You know, I don't care what so-and-so other harp player did. I don't care about Chicago style D minor, you know, up the wazoo on the chromatic. That stuff's kind of boring to me now. Yes, I love little Walter doing it, but I don't care for hearing a whole lot of like octave shit all over the place, only in D minor, you know.
Right.
It's like, it's boring. Yeah. It's boring, people. It's not boring when little Walter does it, because he sounded damn unbelievably great on it and knew how to combine a little bit of the chromatic with the diatonic, like in Blue Lights, that, you know, really an unbelievable instrumental. That's what distinguished him as an artist.
Yeah,
you know?
For sure, man. So I'm curious, you know, you have this great affinity for jazz and for horn players,
Yeah.
singers. Why did you decide to sort of push the trumpet and the sax to the side, and how did you decide you were going to make this instrument, the harmonica, your instrument?
That's a really good question. Thanks for asking. Well, quite honestly, it's about frustration and the solution. I really wanted to be a lot better at playing the trumpet than I was. Now, in fairness to myself, I started in grade school on the trumpet in third grade. I was 9 years old, and took some lessons, some private lessons. I may have had a few lessons in school that I don't really recall, but I do remember eventually taking private lessons with the clarinet teacher, who was my brother's teacher. This guy could also play trumpet, but not with the most beautiful tone, because he didn't play it a lot. But he knew how to blow it. He knew how to blow the air so that the tonality really sounded right, even though it was kind of an airy sound. I was hearing correct stuff from the very beginning, you know. And that makes a big difference. And so we're now referring back to that point in my life where I was on a different path altogether. It was like my parents weren't thinking of me as being a professional musician. You know, I'm really grateful that they gave me the opportunity to learn the trumpet and to have fun with that. But it wasn't like, I want to be a jazz player. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. You know, I think they would have preferred that I be a doctor, you know, that kind of thing.
Sure.
You know, there's a large emphasis in my family on school and your grades and, you know, all of this. This was like the most serious stuff to me. It was like, you know, and I wasn't that thrilled in school, you know, and I was very bright, but a lot of times my grades didn't reflect what I knew. So I would learn stuff when I felt like learning it.
Right. I can relate to
you
that.
know.
Yeah, for sure.
And I persisted that way through high school and went off to become an engineer at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, which was like a very serious science and engineering college, offering PhDs and, you know, all of this. And it was not a co-ed school at the time that I went there, but that's really where I met my cohorts, Danny Klein, the bass player, and Jay Geils. The three of us met there. And we were all on the same path of, this is a mistake.
Becoming engineers, or
Yeah, you know, once you realize how much you have to study, like carrying 18 credit hours of this is like, that means you're studying 5 or 6 serious subjects full time. You know, physics, calculus, chemistry, you know, it's like, God. And at that point, I was just discovering the harp.
Okay. So
that did it for me.
One had to win out there, right?
once the harp came into my life, I couldn't really focus on anything else. I was really distracted by the harp, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I got into the harp, the more I realized, wow, I can't help this. This is like my studies are going right down the tube,
Mm-hmm.
and all I'm paying attention to is the harp. And I knew I was in trouble.
Yeah.
And that was not a good feeling. I'll tell you, come up, you know, the family, you know, I came from, that was not a good feeling for me. And it was not an easy thing to do. But the alternative is you're facing, do you want to flunk out or do you want to leave?
Right.
I decided to leave for a year and then went back. And Danny said to me, I'll give you a month, 2 months at the most. You know,
Love it. He knew.
Because he knew what it was like. Jay knew what it was like. You know, we all knew what it was like. I was the only one who left. We all left, but I was the only one that went back after a year to give it another go.
Mm-hmm.
And I only lasted about 3 or 4 months at that point.
Yeah.
And that was it. It was like, okay, now what am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm telling you the absolute truth about, you know, that there came a point in my life where this was a really serious thing to go from imagining yourself being some kind of academic thing, you know, to a performance oriented life.
Right. Way different.
Way different. And although we all have to perform in life, no matter what you're doing, you know, this is like really putting your ass on the line.
Yeah.
Which is great, actually, because
exciting, right?
Because there's something about committing yourself fully to do the best you can on something, put your ass on the line and see what happens, you know. At that point, though, I want to be clear about this. I didn't have much other choice.
Okay.
You know, it's like I worked or didn't work myself into a corner, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when I called up my mom and dad and told them what I wanted to do, I was still at college when I made this call. Man, that was a call I really dreaded to make.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, but they were actually pretty wonderful about it.
Yeah.
And, they even let me, you know, stay out the, you know, stay the rest of the months through that term and just hang out on campus.
Wow.
I wasn't going to classes anymore. Not to compare myself to Bob Dylan, but a similar experience in terms of the college thing. You know, you just sort of were there. You didn't really go. You know.
Yeah. I love it. Actually, that sounds like a lot of fun.
And that's where the comparison between me and Bob Dylan ends. And I mean that in the best way possible, because Bob Dylan is a freaking genius.
Yes, he is. Mm-hmm.
And we should talk about that a bit too. So.
Yeah, well, let's do that. Let's talk about Bob Dylan for a moment. I think he gets a tough rap a lot from harmonica people. It's easy to say he's not a great harp player, whatever that means. You know, but I mean, it doesn't end there with, you know, there's so much intricacies of what is going on with him. It's almost elusive. You almost don't. It's like sleight of hand as a magician.
Yeah.
You don't really.
Yeah.
It just feels good, and you're like, I really like that, and you don't even know why necessarily unless you really look at it.
Oh, I love his playing from the mid to late 60s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Highway 61, or, you know, that period of work. Mr. Tambourine Man,
right?
Brilliant harp solo.
Mm-hmm.
Those harp solos that he played in first position are genius to me. A lot of people don't get this. You know, I don't care that they don't get it.
Right. Right.
You know, if you try to evaluate Bob Dylan as a cross harp player, then I come to different conclusions. You know, his Bob's cross harp, he doesn't focus very much on cross harp playing. No. If he uses cross harp, sometimes it'll just be one note at the end of a song.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, It's a sound, and it's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's perfect for what he's doing with it, you know. But his style of playing straight harp is beautiful, absolutely beautiful, and it's a combination of melodic, you know, of melody and rhythm, and
Right.
it's always really complimentary to the tune, you
Yeah,
know. So
I agree.
I am nowhere near in the camp of you know, that considers Bob Dylan not a good harp player.
Right.
I think he's a genius harp player, and I think anybody else who has tried to do that kind of straight harp like him, there's some pretty good ones, but they're not Bob.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, he's one of a kind for sure.
Plus, you know, his songwriting, you know, all his singing. He's one of the greatest singers of all time. He's one of the greatest songwriters of all time. I mean, the guy is just,
Yeah.
it's hard to praise him too much, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true. It's very true.
I mean, he's the man, you know.
He's the man. Yeah, his lyrics are mind blowing for me as a
Oh
songwriter.
man.
It's
Yeah, the song, the imagery, you know, when you listen to the lyrics fly off, you know, the images that it forms in the mind, if they're like, they're photographic.
have you read his book Chronicles? It's a great book.
Yeah, I loved it.
I was fascinated how he would go to a library and pull out old newspapers and read a story about what went on that day and write about it. And that was 150
Yeah,
years ago. And it was
yeah.
still
He said he used to do some of that in conjunction with some other songwriter friends of his, like maybe Dave Van Ronk or somebody else. Where that thing of looking at the newspaper and then being affected by it and writing about it was a technique, you know.
yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, I haven't developed that technique yet, but to be as
Meaning, I seldom try to write songs. Um, Fooled around with it just a little, you know, like I have an idea for a lyric or something like that. But like everything else, you kind of have to get down to it. You
yeah,
need your notebook and your pen, and you need to start writing stuff down,
yeah,
you know. And it seems like the guys who are most prolific, they're just writing stuff down all the time. Then they'll start, you know, days later, they'll start thumbing through their book. And then, you know, it goes through this process of expression and then analysis, then rewriting, you know. I
mhm.
know the methods that are used,
Sure.
but it's like I'm so busy practicing and focusing on this jazz stuff, these jazz articulations, you know, try, trying to make the chromatic harp do what I want.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Have you tried? I was just interviewing PT Gazelle recently, and he's
Yeah,
developed this wonderful instrument. Where it's valved, of course. But he's so fluent on it. It's amazing, and I've been trying to sort of make the jump. I've been trying to play it. I'm having a little bit of difficulty, getting used to it after years of playing, a
yeah.
regular diatonic harmonica. But he makes it sound so great, and it blends
Well,
the
think
two.
about valved instruments. Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
That's okay. I was just going to say it finds its home, I think, between the diatonic and the chromatic, and it's got this its own sort of thing. But
Yeah.
I really love it.
Well, long ago, I was along with my inventing partner Pierre Beauregard. We were we were fooling around with some of the early stages of half valving some diatonics, you know, so that the blows would bend
Hmm.
down in the lower part. You know about all that. But like the thing about valves is
Are you?
they're
I'm so sorry to now I've interrupted you, but I want to make sure I clarify this. You're talking about your magic harp now, right? The magic harmonicas. Is this? Uh,
well, yeah. I wasn't trying to go off to
no,
a tangent on that.
okay.
It's just that I remembered that during the period of time, which was a long period of time, that Pierre and I were developing magic harps,
Hmm.
um, we went through various stages of experimenting with a lot of different things. but ultimately ended up with a unified concept that really made sense, and no valving involved.
Okay.
And the net result of all of our invention was that on magic harps, all the draw notes bend with no valving in the harp whatsoever. And what we were doing, and we're very successful at, was creating all these different models that retained what everybody loved about a regular diatonic, which is this combination of chords and melody. In other words, the structure built into the tone layout on a conventional harp, conventional diatonic, that layout of notes, which can be looked at, if you choose to, it can be looked at as two main chords. There's a blow chord and there's the draw chord, you know. And it's useful to think of it that way in terms of thinking about magic harps, because once you start changing what these chords are and the chord quality, you know, the chord type, and the relationship between the blow chord and the draw chord, how big of an interval is it, and how are they staggered with each other, you know. There's ways to fool around with all that to end up with magic harps where all the draws bend and you can play miraculous other genres, other styles just fall so readily out of these tunings. Just like you think, if you were new to harp, you know, and you hear blues harp playing, you think, man, this thing was just made for this, you know. Well, no, it wasn't.
Exactly. That's true. Exactly. Right.
You know,
interesting, right? Yeah.
So it's merely by a change of perspective. In other words, where you place yourself, where you stand when you look at and analyze what's going on in this music, your perspective, where you're observing it from, and then go to a different place. It's like on a baseball field, you know, the way the game looks to the first baseman might be really different from the way it looks to the third baseman or to some guy in the outfield, you know, like there. Then you put it all together, you got music, you know?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I love it.
But the magic harps thing, which was deep, it never got to the point of being commercially available for reasons that we shouldn't spend any time talking about, because it's like trying to bang your head against the wall we were trying to have them be issued by Hohner. We wanted them to be a part of the Hohner catalog. Well, Hohner at that particular time, this is going back to like 1992, 90, you know, the 90s.
Right.
They were in no frame of mind at that particular point they viewed this whole thing of taking that as being cannibalistic to their product line. You know, they knew that magic harps had so much over the conventional models. We were never trying to wipe out the conventional model. We all love the conventional model. Right. It's just that there's so much other stuff you can do that grows out of the idea in the conventional tuning, you know, that once you do this, you realize, wow, there's no end, in a sense, to what you could do. You know, when you start down this road, we were all used to like, well, this instrument's a given. You know, it's like people think that, well, you can't fool around with that. This is religious. You can't like start changing this and do something valid. Well, that's just completely wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I can understand how from a certain perspective of like a purist point of view, don't mess with the traditional thing. But Pierre and I had and have as much love and respect for the traditional thing as anybody could possibly have. Yeah. It was because of that. Yeah. And the desire to want to play more, you know, the desire to want to play jazz, the desire to want to play more things in rock, you know, to have an instrument that just like you pick up a diatonic and play blues on it, and man, there it is. Of course, you got to work your ass off on it in order to be good enough to make me happy. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, I'm stuck on Sonny Boy Williamson, Little Walter, Junior Wells, James Cotton, you know, but I narrow it down even more than that. It's really Little Walter and Sonny Boy Williamson for me. Those were just, and Junior too, and Cotton, but the emphasis much more on the primary guys, you know, Walter and Big Walter too, but not so much Big Walter.
Yeah, yeah.
Rick Estrin once said to me about Big Walter that I hope he won't mind my mentioning this, but he said that he didn't like Big Walter as much as the other players because Big Walter was always stepping on the singer.
Right. I feel you.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
I myself wouldn't have said that, but yeah, it is kind of true, you know.
And you don't want to do that.
Huh?
You don't want to do that. You don't. That's just, yeah.
It's sort of a reflection upon when you do stuff like that. To me, that says something about your musical mentality and mentality as a gentleman, as a person in a situation.
Right.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and also it's kind of stupid for me to just talk out my, you know, I wasn't there. What do I really know about all?
Well, I mean,
you know,
yeah, we can make an educated opinion on that for sure. I mean, yeah. You know, we were talking about being in the studio. You know, producer after producer will say, "Don't play there. Don't play on the vocal." You know,
yeah,
vocal, man. You do that live, you don't get asked on stage too many times with other bands. You know, if you're sitting in.
Yeah. Yeah, and Little Walter encountered some of that. I think in the very beginning at Chess when he was started playing through an amp, you know, and some of this is depicted in that that movie Cadillac Records. But I've heard about this before all of that, and that Walter needed to be reined in. Little Walter, he needed to be guided and like even work on his timing, you know, according to Jimmy Rogers and some of those guys, they would say Little Walter's timing wasn't very good in the beginning. But what I think he was referring to was that not that Walter didn't have a good sense of time and swing. He had a great sense of time and swing, but his following of the form of the moment,
right,
might have been different, you know.
Yeah, I feel you.
Maybe Walter and some of those guys weren't so strictly enforcing themselves before these recording situations. They weren't strictly making themselves play just 12 bars, you know. Uh-huh. Sometimes it'd be 13, 11.
Right. I hear
you know. Yeah. And that's part of the magic of that stuff is like, man, they make that work no matter what, you know.
Yeah, totally. They were, yeah.
And that thing of going to a 5 anywhere, you know, going to a 5 chord into whatever chord you're going to go, you know, an interpolated 5 or an interpolated 2/5, you know, sticking in this little quick progression before you get to some other 7th chord. This shit happens all the time in jazz, you know. They do this routinely, and this shit is cool, man.
Yeah. Right on. We spoke early about music theory and how important you feel it is, and I said how much theory is enough, and
that's a great question.
And how much theory were guys like Little Walter and Sonny Boy 1 and 2? How much theory did they? I mean, was it just innate? Were they just born, you know, with this, or how much theory were they really using?
Yeah. These are really good questions, and I have a theory about it.
Okay.
Do you want to speak more about it, or should I answer it?
I want you to speak, man.
Okay. The answer I want to give to how much theory is enough depends completely on the individual and their intentions. In other words, you could study music theory for a long, long time if you chose to, and further build upon your understanding. And, you know, like I watch a lot of stuff on YouTube concerning music theory. There's a lot of great expositions on theory done by piano players. They're usually the best ones to watch about this. I find better than guitar most of the time, although I do watch both. But the thing about the theory is that what I include in theory is intervals, the sound of intervals. This is the most important thing, you know, not whether you understand 2 minor 5 1 or 1 6 2 5, or, you know, what's important is, can you hear that your pitch is not correct? Can you hear that this interval, which should sound like a sung interval, bum bum, are you filling that C to F? Are you filling that F with enough air so that this sounds proper?
Mm-hmm.
You know, most players will just go, yeah, I'm on the right spot on the harp. You know, and that's about as much attention as they direct to it.
Right.
So the music theory is like, the theory grows out of the fact that musical tones are compound, meaning that they have a fundamental frequency and there are these overtones to the sound. Okay. And a good musical tone has whole number multiples of the fundamental. If they're not whole number multiples, then that's kind of a sour sound.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
So people should think about some of these aspects of tone. They should work directly toward a beautiful sound. And the way to start doing that is, and this comes from my trumpet training, is start practicing playing individual notes separate from a riff.
Uh-huh.
Like a good A needs to sound like this, you know, a good G here, you know.
Yeah.
And if you can't just pick up the harp and play this beautiful full tone, centered full tone, then everything else you play is going to be wimp-assed because you don't have the foundation. You don't have the focus in your mind. You don't know to direct your practice to the sound of these intervals, regardless of the bag. Now, some of this stuff goes by fast. And in the context of blues or copying Little Walter, let's use that as an example, you know, playing juke or those sorts of things. There's a certain built-inness about, we've heard all this stuff. We know the context in which we're hearing it. And at that point, when you hear somebody playing that stuff, you evaluate them primarily by how good are they compared to Little Walter, you know, or whomever, right? You know, but seldom do players analyze what they're really hearing tone-wise from this person, to obtain some degree of understanding of what does this person really know. By really know, I mean, what does their body know? What does their musical mind know? So my whole thing is built upon single notes played with fullness, beauty, and a basic good sound. And I don't rely on just practicing riffs to achieve that. That's not enough. You have to go directly at it. Just like if I were practicing the trumpet, I would start probably by playing some long tones, some single notes, you know. And if you really want to get good, you have to go through a significant period of practice where this becomes like a routine. This is something that you do to get centered, you know, to build your concept of tone. Because all the other good stuff that comes from musical lines depends upon a good tone.
Man, that's excellent advice for any level of player. That's
thanks. It's like most people don't want to do this. Most people don't want to go bum 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 or bum 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 or bum, 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 boo doo 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 doo, ba-da-dee-da-da. Stuff taken from classical music. I mean, this was something I used to play on the trumpet, the Haydn trumpet concerto. You know, so it's like when I'm playing harp, I'm not really thinking harp. I'm thinking trumpet. I'm thinking voice. I'm thinking pure a sound as I can get that then gives you the license. It makes your car work.
Right.
You know, it's like when you've got this concept of sound and that of the compound nature of the tone, that's when you direct your attention more toward what are those, like, how do I produce a really nice sound? Because producing a really nice sound is really key to being able to play ballads. And the way to develop your playing the most is to play ballads. I don't care if you do it on the diatonic or the chromatic. It's particularly great for the chromatic. But ballad playing, as is done by the great jazz players or the great jazz singers, you know, or Frank Sinatra, a great example.
Favorite singer.
The greatest, one of the greatest musicians of all time. You know, this guy's approach, I learned so much from Sinatra in terms of his approach about, his approach is really kind of like talking on pitch. And he almost sort of invented this. How about we, you know?
Yeah.
How about we keep this party polite? You know, never get out of my sight. This shit is genius.
Yeah.
You know, genius from a theatrical point of view and from a musical point of view. You know,
Read. Yes. Yeah.
Almost every musician I know of loves Frank Sinatra, reveres Frank Sinatra. Doesn't matter what bag you're coming from.
Yeah.
You know, and then you have other singers who, it's a weird thing where, like, you know, the different decades have had unique things that have happened with singers. Like, you know, Frank Sinatra was really powerful and popular. And then you have the Doors came along, and Jim Morrison presented a whole other way of singing. Similar to Sinatra in a way, in that spoken thing.
It's so weird you bring this up. I was just saying this to my wife the other day. You know, a Doors song came on, and I'm like, that's so weird. I mean, I could hear Sinatra singing that. In fact, it sounds like something, you know, it has certain things that are the same. I know it's very...
Yeah. And, you know, whether he came, from what I know about Jim Morrison, which isn't a lot, but he came through all this mostly through intuition. And his primary interest was as a poet. You know, wasn't like he was that focused on vocal mechanics or anything like that. And there were plenty of periods of time when he was just barely functioning, you know, so, and not for me to comment on or criticize, that's for sure. But, you know, I mean, but that was a brilliant thing that happened, that transition in the idea of a lead singer and sounding different.
I feel like Sinatra attributed a lot of that to working with Tommy Dorsey and that amazing breath control.
That's right.
That he could just hang on to.
Yeah, and he was also kind of influenced by Billie Holiday. He loved Billie Holiday. And Billie Holiday, of course, had this free way of delivering, you know, like she would play with the time and the phrasing in such creative ways. And I think Sinatra was directly influenced by some of that, you know, and Frank worked really hard, man. Frank, I mean, he spent a great deal of time, effort, and money on studying his voice training, and thinking about the theatrics, you know, like being aware that every move as a singer, everything you do with your hands is critically important. One false move with the hands and you're done.
Yeah.
You know, that's the level of artist, you know, that he was, you know.
Yeah.
And so I've been hugely influenced by him, starting when I was 9, 10 years old. My Uncle Harry had this fantastic hi-fi player. This was before the days of stereo.
Yeah.
He had a fantastic hi-fi, man. This thing barked, you know.
Right on.
And it was one of those 3-way speaker systems that would fit in the corner of the room.
Yeah.
You know, a bell tube amplifier and a garage turntable. And he had a fantastic LP collection, a lot of Basie and everything from Frank Sinatra on Capitol.
Yeah.
So I started listening to these records, and man, it just affected me really directly. You know, I became aware really early on that this guy, Frank Sinatra, I really like this guy,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I became obsessed with, there was something about the way he used his voice. I carried that interest over into all the stuff we've been talking about, vocal mechanics and the harp.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
I specifically remember one time before I started taking voice lessons, I was up on my rooftop back when I used to live in Boston proper, and I was up there one day, and I had been listening to a lot of Sinatra, and I decided I wanted to see if there was something. I wanted to try singing the first word. I don't remember what song it was, but the first word or two of something that he did. And it wasn't something that required you to be loud. It just required definite, you know. It's like, so I really started to focus on this thing of the inception of the sound.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start and make this sound like Frank does?
Mm-hmm.
What is it about that, you know? And what it is, again, it's the control of the airstream. Mm-hmm. And it's directly related to speech. Hey, you know, and where things get really confused a lot, like for harp players, is harp players are used to thinking of blowing and drawing, or blowing and sucking. Mm-hmm. You know? If you blow like
terrible,
that's not it.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah.
Like trumpet playing for normal kind of volume doesn't take much more air than just speaking or singing. Mm-hmm. Easy, you know. The same thing with the harp. If you put all that extra stuff in there, a lot of times nothing will happen. Right. Or, you know, or you're blowing way past the good tone.
Yes.
The good sound. Mm-hmm. You know, harps these days, once you start to get into the medium loud to loud level, the quality of the sound goes down. There's a lot more air hissing, you know, there's more air in the sound. It's less pure. Yeah. So what the smart amplified harp players do is they play lightly and let the mic and the amp do their significant share of work. Mm-hmm. But you don't want to be blowing your brains out into a mic. Now, I've done tons of that, blowing my brains out into a mic, but I'm changing all this, you know, and I understand now, and I've been doing this for a long time now. I understand exactly why I'm changing it. And a few years back, I did a duo project with just harp and guitar. My friend Shun Ing on playing fingerstyle guitar, acoustic guitar. So I was strictly focused on acoustic harp and acoustic guitar.
Okay, right.
And in a way, I can do a lot more with that. And it allowed me to focus on playing the best acoustic sound that I could get and let the PA pick up the depth and full, you know, it's like, this is a hi-fi presentation of harp sound.
Yeah. I get that.
And in some cases, it was probably like too much, you know, I don't know.
But, I mean,
you got to be careful with that, you know, harp really close on a PA mic.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. you know what?
Yeah.
It's uncanny to me how much this is all relating to singing, and the approach that you take as a singer. Speaking of great singers, I wanted to say a moment ago that your partner there in your duo is a fantastic singer. He's
Oh
doing
my God.
that's
Yeah.
he knows about air support and not pushing and all of that great
Yeah.
stuff that you hear in great singers. Even when it sounds like they're just wrenching their voice, they're not. The good ones aren't.
Right.
You know, it's
No, Shun, even more than maybe what you heard from Shun on our recording, on the duo recording, because I guess you've heard that.
yeah.
So I don't know how, maybe you heard Shun some other way too. I don't know. But the Shun would amaze me with his singing. In the beginning, when we first got together, I was really kind of amazed at him. But then later on, after we were together like 2, 3, even like the last year, he was getting more and more into the singing, and just like during a sound check, we'd be up there sound checking, and I would let him, work on his guitar and his voice, and like when you're sound checking,
Yeah.
don't play while he's doing this. You know what I mean? It's like, don't step on everybody. So, but he'd start singing some, maybe it's a Stevie Wonder thing or some ballad thing or some classic thing. I'd be looking at him like, God damn.
Yeah.
I'd have to just tell him right then and there, man, you sound great singing that. That is just beautiful,
Mhm.
And I would study how I would watch it. I would study, what is he how is he doing this? How is he achieving this? And I would talk to him at great length about it
Mhm.
sometimes. And yeah, he had some vocal training too. And but like most people who can do all this great, is like he focused on it in infinite detail for himself. You know, he would spend hours practicing singing on a microphone at home.
Mhm.
It wasn't just like he's just sitting down at the sofa with his guitar singing acoustically. He'd actually practice singing on mic, this whole thing of how to do this.
Mhm.
And man, Shun was one of those guys. I don't know if he's just a natural somehow. He seems like such a naturally great singer.
Mhm.
Um, but I also know the extent to which he worked on it. So
Yeah.
put that in there too.
There's a I noticed that he's so relaxed. He's never doing manipulating, trying to get. He's just very relaxed. His face is relaxed when he's singing, and I think that's a really important thing for both harp players and for singers as well, is to relax. You know.
I know what you mean about the relaxation, but also in watching him carefully, he uses a lot of intense facial expressions when he's singing. So there is a lot of movement of the mask, you
Okay.
know, um,
Placement where he's placing tones.
placement, stuff with the facial muscles, which is probably helping him with his placement in certain ways.
Mhm.
Um, all I know is amazing to me, and really moving to me. That to be working with somebody that closely who could give me some, like I'd ask him, Shun, like, what are you doing here? How are you doing that? And there were also times when his singing, he would constrict his throat to get a certain roughness,
Mhm.
a certain tension in the sound, the way some singers who that's all they can do is sing that way.
Sure.
you know,
Right. Right. Right.
you know.
Yeah.
Eh,
Right. Learning to sing with like vocal compression is it takes a while, and you can do damage if you're. And again, it's about less is more. It's not about it's about
Yeah.
like breathing through the
Shun
whole.
could sing, he could sing like he could do a real good Michael Jackson, for example.
I bet he could.
You
Yeah.
know, in
Yeah.
fact, when I first heard Shun, I really, really felt that his voice was a combination. It was in between Michael Jackson and James Brown. It was perfect
Yeah.
to me, for what I wanted to work on, for what we could do together.
Mhm.
Where he could take his voice and make it really sweet, like Michael, if you want, or he could really sound like James Brown. It's kind of mind blowing, man.
Yeah.
without doing like he knew how to reproduce the essence of what that singer sounded like, you know.
Yeah, he knew his instrument for sure.
Yeah, same with guitar. The way he approached guitar was from a really non-conventional point of view.
Okay.
Like we would talk about, I would try to learn certain theory things from him. He went to Berkeley for a year on a scholarship from he grew up in Singapore. Anyway, I spaced. Sorry.
No, you were just talking about how he Berkeley.
Yeah, but I was asking him certain things about something about his guitar, the guitar. When it came to scales, like, you know, because there are times when I would really direct my attention to certain scales for various reasons, certain practice things, so what conceptions, whatever. And I learned from Shun that, like a lot of jazz players these days, they focus mostly on the chromatic scale. They play everything chromatically. In other words, everything is given some degree of color.
Right.
And there's lots of techniques that you can learn for people who have no money and think that they can't afford lessons or to pay people. Man, there's so much knowledge. There's so much that you can learn from YouTube. Get into it, folks.
Yes.
I don't want to hear lame excuses about, well, I don't know anything about chords. Screw you. Then get lost. Go find out. It's not going to cost you anything except your effort.
Yeah.
You know, I have no tolerance for this attitude. I don't know anything about chords. Yeah, you do. You know?
I had a friend who always called it the University of YouTube. I'm like, how did you learn to do that? University of YouTube. I'm like, oh,
yeah, man, it's a dual-edged sword. You know, it's a wonderful thing, though. You know, those of us who are performers get to see good and bad of ourselves.
Totally.
You know,
yeah,
stuff you wish was never up there. You know,
yeah, it happens.
But that's the way it goes. You know, it's like there's something I thought about YouTube a long time ago. On the one hand, it was a drag to have, you know, people in the audience recording everything you're doing, and, you know, and then posting it to YouTube, good or bad. But the more I thought about that situation, the more I thought, okay, well, it's your ass. You better be as good as you can be.
Yeah, that's right, man.
You know, and it's like, it's nerve-wracking because you could already start out your day and go, oh man, this is not going to be a good one, you know. And yet you're hoping for that thing of when you step on stage and play the first note or two, suddenly everything just, here we are. Yeah. You know,
it's a magical moment.
Yeah, the magical moment. But this thing about the chromatic scale, a lot of people talk about this on YouTube, and that if you're a classic jazz player, which is basic conception I have of me, is that even though I'm not a fluent jazz player yet, that's always been where I've been going, you know. And now I have the instrument that I'm focused on doing it on, which is the chromatic harp. And I accept nothing for granted about it. You know, some people say, oh, that's a really stiff instrument. It has a cold tone. Well, that's all bullshit. It has a cold tone because you're not blowing it right. You know, you have to blow it warm.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to say, a helpful hint to those people who play chromatic, warm that instrument up. Before you start playing on it, when you practice, don't just pick up a cold chromatic and start blowing on it, because that chromatic is going to shut down in about 5 or 7 minutes from moisture and condensation that you're going to get in there because you didn't take the time to warm the thing up.
Wow.
It's very important.
I didn't know. Interesting.
Yeah.
Again,
and hopping back to this thing about intervals and scales and ear training, you know, trying to get all my students to slow down. when you practice, I want to hear you play on our, I want you to tell me the notes in that chord. I want to hear you sing it. You'd be amazed the number of people that can't even sing a chord arpeggio. If you can't sing a chord arpeggio, how do you expect to sound any good when you play it on another instrument? Yeah. You're going to come to a note, like if you play it in first position. If you try to play, you know, a 1/7 chord, the blow chord, but make it a 7, go bum, 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 bum. Yeah. That's a, you know, that's like a half-step bend. Sure. That's a difficult bend to nail and hold it out. You know, but yet that note is the same note. That's the same note as the flat 3 in cross harp. And I try to point out to people, well, you're pretty good at playing that note in cross harp, but you don't seem to realize that's the same note as the 7th of the blow chord. It's the same pitch. Yeah. You know, so it shouldn't be any more difficult for you to play it as the 7th of the blow chord than the flat 3 of the draw chord on cross. I don't know if I'm losing you with this, but no, sometimes
I'm hanging with you, but yes, that's
how much. I don't want to get more technical about it now because I know it makes people's eyes cross.
No, I think this is great.
That's the one thing about harp players that I really don't like is harp players don't like to think. They don't want to think. In fact, they've been taking this approach with the diatonic for so long. The thing that makes it easy for them to play this instrument is because it comes in these different keys. They don't have to learn to play these riffs in different keys.
Right. That's so true.
That's kind of a crutch, and it becomes a mental crutch. You know, a mental crutch in that it shuts down the thinking. You know, like a sax player, for example, doesn't have like a sax in every key.
Right.
Trumpet players don't have a trumpet in every key.
Right.
They have their one trumpet and they learn to play it in every key.
Yes.
That's what it takes to be a musician.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks.
Right. And Howard Levy talked to me about, you know, how basically he can play any of his harmonicas in any of the keys, right? I'm certainly not anywhere close to that. But are you venturing toward that as well? I mean, can you pick up a C harp and play it in any key?
No.
Yeah.
I don't try to do that.
Okay.
I don't subscribe to that approach. Okay. There are times when like in a certain solo thing or something like that where I might go for it and use an overblow. But I don't make it an inherent part of my approach. You know, for Howard and his approach, it's necessary. That's what he does. Yeah. You know, no, I would really rather play a linear instrument, a linear sounding instrument. What do I mean by linear? I mean that the tone, like on a trumpet, for example, you play a scale on a trumpet if you're good and if you're doing it right, pretty much each note has the same sound, the same tone. You know, that's what I want my basic instrument to be. I'm tired at this point of fooling around with looking for shortcuts. You know, oh well, this little tuning here has this little nifty thing here, so let me resort to that. No, I'm not resorting to anything anymore. I'm committed to the chromatic harp as a jazz player, as a rock player, as a pop player, whatever. You know, doesn't mean that I've given up on playing the diatonic at all. Not even a little. You know, I appreciate each one for its strengths, but to me, the chromatic harp is sort of unequaled in its sensitivity and its ability to mimic. But the mimicking part, you need to be careful about that because the bending on the chromatic is really kind of stiff. not only is it stiff in comparison to a diatonic, but as you bend the pitch down, it doesn't sound like a diatonic kind of bend at all.
Right. No, it doesn't.
One of the hallmarks of the styles of jazz playing that I like let's take Red Pricek, for example. He does a lot of tail offs of the, ow, ooh, ooh, wow. Ooh, wow. The thing is to be able to deal with this kind of a style on a stiff instrument. That's really what I'm involved with right now. How do you work the techniques in order to just employ a little bit of bending so that you achieve what you're trying to do, but it's merely a hint. It's just a suggestion of a tail off before it gets to this point of sounding like, no, that's not it.
Right.
It takes a lot of skill to do this. I'm not even going to begin to say that I've really fully developed that, but I believe that you can. Yeah. See, belief is so important to Howard's a good example of what I mean by this thing of belief. Howard, when he first discovered all this stuff for himself, about the overblows and all that, without knowing a lot about the harp, he just believed that these other notes must be there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He believed it it's not that he researched it. He just concluded that they must be there because all other instruments have them. Right. At least according to him, that's what his thinking was at the time. Exactly. So what I concluded from that was, see, that's a perfect example of how important belief is and determination. He believed it enough to make it real. He believed it enough to practice it so much, and I think he realized this is his thing. And it's great that he is so free about sharing this with everybody.
Yeah, he really is. Yeah,
I like that about him. What I don't like so much is, and this has nothing to do with Howard really, but that approach, this overblow approach to the diatonic, has permeated the diatonic school. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. It's great that Howard does this and others who want to pursue that, but it seems like so many players are so influenced by it that, again, it boils down to this thing of harp players don't need harp lessons. They need music lessons. They need to know how bad they sound trying to do that. This is my opinion, speaking personally.
I feel you. I know. I'm with you.
I'm not saying Howard sounds bad. That's a different matter. That's Howard.
Well, there's a lot of guys who sound great doing it, but yes, I understand your point.
Yeah. And for me, I don't want to knock myself out trying to do this on a diatonic when I think that those styles are much better played on the chromatic harp. I hear it and know it. I know it for sure. It's true for me. It might not be true for anybody else listening, but this is my truth.
Yeah.
And I'll explain it to anybody who wants to listen forever. I have a lot to say about all this, as I think you can tell.
No, that's why
and there's no secret. People say, what's the secret? The secret is there is no secret. The secret is you got to get down to it. You got to be serious.
Yeah.
You have to commit. You have to put your ass on the line. You have to put something into it.
Mm-hmm. You're inspired.
That's all.
You're very inspired.
That's all that means. Well, you know what it is? It's like when you start to, you have to get to a point with your playing in terms of growth. You have to get to a point. I mentioned this before. I don't ever want to sound like that again. Or surely there's more. Surely this could be better. What am I missing? And the more I've taught people, the more I realize the problem is that they were never trained like a trumpet player from the beginning days.
Mhm.
On a trumpet instrument like that, they'll show you, you'll learn the fingering chart, you'll learn the fingerings, then you start reading a little bit of rudimentary music.
Mhm.
You'll play some little scale fragments, and then usually the end of the day, the end of the practice period, there's like a really simple, relatively slow, beautiful little song,
Exactly.
and it's the song material that develops the player. It's the focus. Your ear should be able to hear, even if you're not good on the instrument you're trying to play, you need to have an ear to tell you, that doesn't sound right, what I'm playing here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of players are pretty good at detecting it doesn't sound right, but what they're not so good at is recognizing that the real tone, the real sound of their interval isn't good.
Mm-hmm.
It's all this stuff goes way beyond playing by the numbers. When somebody asks to see, well, I wish I had a transcription of Whammer Jammer as an example, blow 3, draw 2, bend 2, I hate that stuff. I can't stand even looking at those things, whether it's Whammer Jammer or anything else.
Yeah.
I really don't like that learning that way. And I think most players are probably turned off by it. It makes your eyes cross, I say go for stuff directly,
Yeah.
Even if you know nothing about theory, all you need to know is that this is played on this harp.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you got to know. The rest of it, you can teach yourself. And I'm saying that not to put teachers out of business, because we need really good teachers. We need teachers to tell people, hey, study music. Then your harp playing will be a lot better. Now I realize, I'm really kind of a prick about this.
You're serious about it. You've learned.
Well, I am, and it's like, how much time do you have to fool around? It's like, get with it.
Yes.
It's like, make a decision, decide what you really care about, and go after it. But narrow it down. It's like, I find that the type of practice that I'm talking about doing, you can spend a lot of time practicing like this.
Mm-hmm.
And you should, if you want to be the best player that you can be. But then there's also, and this is where most players put their effort, is in their repertoire. Oh, I got to keep practicing this tune. I got to get better on this tune. So they play through the tune. They play along to the tune. That's the extent of, that's as far as they analyze or take it. Mm-hmm. It's like, how much can I sound like so-and-so on this recording? And that's all good to do. You'll learn a lot from doing it, but you'll learn a lot more from adding in all this other stuff that I've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you'll discover that, hey, your problem is you don't even hear that note right.
Which can happen.
If you don't hear that note right, you're not going to play it right.
That's right, man. Absolutely.
You're not going to even find it on the harp. You're going to have to call up somebody and say, what's going on here? What is he doing? Well, why are you calling me and asking me? You haven't looked enough yourself. Slow it down.
Yeah.
Slow down. And the other thing I'm really a nut about is people counting off. When you practice, count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bum, 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 bum. Set a groove. Yeah. The groove is more important than anything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'm a big fan of Victor Wooten in this regard.
Yeah.
He gives great lectures about, don't lose the groove to find the key, for example. Right. And this idea of wrong notes. Uh-huh. There are no wrong notes.
Maybe a
You know,
note, right?
yeah, this stuff is like coming from him. It's really brilliant the way he explains it, because this thing of like a wrong note, perceiving something as a wrong note. If you make a mistake in your playing and it's just like this one thing, yeah, it'll be perceived of as a wrong note. But if you persist in that wrong note, if you repeat it,
Yeah.
especially if you repeat it with real intention
Uh-huh.
and then resolve it by a half step move up or down, then everyone goes,
That was brilliant.
oh man, yeah. You see, it's like, it's not a wrong note. What's wrong is the way we're thinking about it.
Yes. I've utilized that that approach a number of times.
Say that again. What?
I've utilized
What'd
that
you say?
approach a number of times. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, the thing of recovering from a mistake like that is a lot easier said than done. I find that actually what that really amounts to is you have to practice making mistakes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean,
You
or
know,
all right.
practice it so that you can extract yourself from it with finesse.
I love that.
It's not that easy,
No, I love that's a great quote. That's fantastic. I love it, man. I mean, you are very inspirational. I feel like some way, though uh, you're a scientist, but you also have this sort of metaphysical thing going on. I feel like that's sort of like you're saying you got to believe it. Howard believed. You got I think that speaks to your
yeah.
soul and your heart. Well, you followed your heart right out of engineering school.
Yeah. Well, I followed it even before that. I followed it when I started with the trumpet. And I knew the first time I heard Louis Armstrong that something had changed in me. That lit a fuse, that lit a fire that went out once. When the Geils Band broke up, it was a very depressing period for about 8 years for me. I played hardly at all. You can fall out of love of all of this stuff. You can get to a point where your feelings about it are so wounded from multiple directions that you just don't do it for a long period of time. But man, when I got back into it, woo, it was with a big vengeance, and because I had realized at that point, it's like these attitudes that we have are adopted. They're by choice. You can wallow in a certain thing for a long period of time and feel okay about it, but you could just as easily decide, you know what, I'm gonna start working on this. The key to being happy as a musician is to work on it. Work on your weaknesses. That's far easier said than done.
Yeah.
But so the solution to all of this stuff for me
Yes.
was to believe in the chromatic, and to believe in the diatonic harp and the magic harps, and form this big picture, that takes in everybody from, Frank Sinatra, Billie Holiday, Jim Morrison. All of this stuff is the same thing.
Yes.
It's all vocal. It's all spoken in the moment. Hey, get away from my car. That's all you got to know about vocal, about moving the air. Is it speech? Hey, not, not, yeah, it's that when you're playing, the high bent thing on Whammer Jammer. Yeah, that's when you do that. But by and large, most of the stuff we love as harp players, those idols that we have, both Sonny Boy Williamson's, particularly Little Walter. I don't think Walter played all that hard. He played in such a way as to produce a beautiful tone and maybe really smooth. And he had a conception. I think the fact that Little Walter played guitar, I meant to mention this before when we were talking about
Chord.
where Walter got some of his power from, or his knowledge, and these other guys. I think the ones who played guitar have an advantage. It's not so much that they studied theory specifically, but when you look at a guitar, visually, a player can figure out what's going on by the intervals on the fretboard and the strings. I mean, it's like, I don't think it's too big a leap for a guitar player, even those who we might think were ignorant in this regard. I don't think Walter was ignorant in this regard at all. He may not have been able to have a conversation about music theory, but he really knew what was going on because of his relationship to the guitar.
Right. Yes.
I have no idea whether he could play anything on piano or not. I don't know. I have no idea. But he certainly was around it a lot,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's also a great instrument to be able to sort of be able to visualize the keyboard and understand the chords and what's happening, especially for a chromatic player, right? To be able to go to a chromatic and be able to play it like a piano.
Yeah. The chromatic, it's like when I'm teaching people chromatic, I've taken different approaches, and after not too long, I discovered that there's a lot of preamble that I would like to give people to understand about a major scale, the diatonic chords, and the secondary dominant chords. This is all actually really simple music theory. And all it takes is to just sit down and pay attention to this and C, D, E, the C major scale.
Yeah.
Then C, E, G, every other note, forming chords on every other note like this. This is not like rocket science. This is just directing your attention in a way you're maybe not used to.
Right.
In a way you're probably really resistant to. Oh, you mean I'm going to have to think? God forbid. Well, the thing is, you can think pretty good when you start counting on your fingers. Do that. First degree, second degree, third, fourth, fifth, C, D, E, F, G. Oh, let's see, F, that's the fourth. I mean,
yeah,
this stuff is easy, folks. Come on. What's more difficult is then to continue to pay attention and realize, okay, there are these diatonic chords, like in the key of C, for example. You got C major, you got your C major 7th on the first degree. Then you got D minor, or D minor 7th, then E minor 7th, then F major, then G dominant 7th. This is like the most basic fundamental stuff of any songwriter, of anything, okay? But then when you explore it a little bit further, okay, so you get all these chords that come right out of the major scale. Well, each one of those chords has what's called a secondary dominant, like a 5 of that chord.
Okay.
So like the 5 of a D minor 7th chord is A7. And wouldn't you know, A7th is one of the chords that's used on the bridge of I Got Rhythm.
Okay, right.
You see, so it's a short step to once you introduce these secondary dominant chords into the picture. That's when you got like the most basic jazz tune of all time. I Got Rhythm.
Sure.
Goes to the bridge, the 3/7, the 3 dominant 7 chord, to the 6th dominant, 3, 6, 2, 5. We all know what this sounds like. Yeah. Get hip to it, people. Yeah. Listen to this stuff. Put the chord chart in front of you and go, oh yeah, it's going to the 3 chord here. Well, where does that 3/7 chord come from? It comes from being a secondary dominant of the, I think you know what I'm saying.
Okay.
You dropped out there for a second. I didn't. You said something, but I think it kind of muted or something.
That's okay. It probably wasn't worth hearing anyway. Yes, but the theory.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I definitely could use more theory. I audited a theory class in college because I knew that I was studying communication, but I I knew that I wanted to be in music, and I knew that I needed some theory. And they quickly jumped from the rudimentary things to the very difficult things. And I wasn't even a music major, so here I was. It was eye opening and quite
Yeah.
It freaked me out a little bit, just to be honest.
Yeah. I can well understand your feeling about that. And I was there myself for
Yeah.
a long time,
But
It's like in the beginning days of working with the Geils Band, I would ask Jay all kinds of questions, about some of the chord progressions. He explained to me how some of this stuff worked, etc. And that was helpful. But it wasn't until I really got down to it myself, after seeing enough expositions about a major scale and everything you derive from it. Major scale, the modes of the major scale, all this stuff which scares people off like crazy because they hear a word mode like, oh my God. They don't realize that they're already playing a mode when they play the slide chromatic in D minor.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the second mode of the C major parent scale on the harp, So it's like when you point that out to them that, blue lights, it's just Dorian, this is what it is. This is not like a big mystery, a big deal. The reason you're having trouble with it is because you're not directing your attention to the details. You're too much in a hurry to get to the next record you're going to copy, and do it shitty. I'm really pissy this way.
I love it. I feel like I needed to hear this. I think I personally needed to hear this in a way. There's a...
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
I mean,
I find it helpful to let people know this because this is the central problem, even for good players. There's a lot of good players who are good on the diatonic, good at playing blues.
Mm-hmm.
But they may not have a grasp of this really in this way that we've been talking, and how this affects ultimately the way you sound, because the tonality of your intervals, sloppy players don't play with good tonality. What do I mean by tonality? I mean like C to F or C to G, a melody, a sung melody, a played melody. I don't care what instrument it's on. Tonality has to be operative in order for it to sound good, to sound beautiful. Singers that sing without attention to tonality sound bad.
Right.
Yes. And even good singers will sound bad if they haven't warmed up, if their voice isn't like, it's like, get serious about this.
That's right.
Like the thing of, now, I don't vocalize every day because I'm not doing gigs like for a long time here because of all this COVID stuff. But if I had a gig coming up, I would be vocalizing like crazy, leading, like 3-4 days before, even longer because of the period of time I've had off.
Yeah.
But as a singer, when you come back to it, even if you've taken time off, if you have a good foundation in the vocal mechanics, if you have a vocalizing exercises that you know how to do, this can work miracles as far as your voice.
Mm-hmm.
You can go from sounding terrible to sounding really good in a matter of a few days by focusing your instrument and your mind, Then the more I did all that, the more I realized, wait a minute, I can apply these same observations, the same control, the same approach to the harp. Imagine the harp is the voice.
That's right.
It's the boss. The voice is the boss of the air control.
That's exactly right.
And it's not something you have to be conscious of thinking about all the time. You need to develop this to the point of like, wait a minute, I've been doing this since I was a child. Hey, there's no talking about vocal mechanics. It's just do it. Right. Just say, hey, now do that into the instrument, but don't make the vocal sound at the same time. Just work the air the same way.
Clarify that. Yes, I agree. Oh man, this has been.
There were a couple times going way back when I did that thing of like, you sing and hold out a vocal pitch while you're producing.
You do
You
that,
can do some wild,
right?
you can do some wild stuff like. Well, I did that on Whammer Jammer, that
Yeah,
tie popping thing,
yeah.
which is a gross example of that.
People love people love that. It's really cool.
Yeah,
But,
I got people like can't figure out what that is. You know, it's like, can't you tell that's my voice? I mean, geez, you know.
you know, at first it's like you don't consider that you would might be doing that, but then you're once
Yeah.
once you realize, oh, you can totally hear that. Yeah.
Well, I needed at that point in the tune when we were putting this song together, I needed something at that point that was going to be outside the harp or not conventional, you know.
Yeah.
And that idea of doing that, I think, came to me in the heat of the moment doing, recording Whammer Jammer. It's like, and then of course, you know, you get a successful attempt or two at it, and then you want to make it better, and you know, and then it became a thing that I had to do all the time, you know. And now I can't sing that high anymore. I can't do that, you know. When I try to do it, I just don't nail it. So I'm working on something else to do in that spot.
Yeah.
You know? Like, you know, over the years, I've seen many people play Whammer Jammer on YouTube. There's just, you know, and recently a friend of mine sent me, it was a live performance by a woman who plays violin. She's good. Violin, blues, rock, everything. She did Whammer Jammer on the violin.
Wow.
And it was like, whoa, man.
Yeah.
And she did a really good job with this thing, man. And when it comes to that section of the vocal scream, the descending, you know, thing, she did a thing with the quick bow back and forth like this, and a descending, you know, a descending thing on the fretboard. It was like pretty cool.
Yeah.
I thought maybe I'll steal that from her. I haven't worked on this yet, but you know, I just saw this like last week. I thought that's pretty cool. Maybe that would be an alternative sort of thing to try. You know, I get ideas from watching other people do this stuff. You know,
imagine how blown her mind would be to know that, you know, you're gonna maybe steal her idea there for Whammer Jammer. That's incredible.
Yeah, she was quite good at it. And there's another guy this has been out for maybe 5 or 6 years on YouTube. Maybe you've seen it. This guy who does all of Whammer Jammer, this thing.
That's incredible. I haven't seen that, but I've got to put that on my Facebook page.
It's really amazing, the determination that this gentleman has doing this, you know, and he's all set up to do it. You know, it's to the live Whammer Jammer. Yeah. So it's got Peter's vocal rap, which is a fantastic introduction he does to me playing Whammer Jammer. You know, you're gonna move a groove, you know, this whole motor mouth thing that Wolf does. And so the guy's patiently waiting for Wolf to get to that. And then when I do the now, he's got that, and he gets all that with his hands. It's insane.
I wonder how much music theory he has under his belt.
I have no idea.
Not enough.
And then, of course, there's the Three Stooges thing of Whammer Jammer that somebody put together. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, but it's really something.
I've been missing out, apparently. I haven't seen that one either. Yeah, I'm going to do a search.
Well, it's funny. It's funny. It's entertaining to see, you know, like, see, the thing about Whammer Jammer, and I'm not tooting my own horn by talking about this, because I remember a period of time when I remember saying to Jay one time, I said, you know, I don't really understand all that much the attraction of Whammer Jammer, you know, for the audience, because to me, it's not really very musical. That was how I felt about it. I've changed my mind about that, but that's how I felt about it way back then. you know, it's a little show off piece. It was specifically developed to have a little feature piece like that at some point in the show. But a lot of times, the reality of the shows was Peter was breaking mic stands intentionally all the time. He would take the mic stand, slam it down into the floor, you know, knock the bass off of it. They'd have to put another one. You know, it's just part of the whole shtick.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes he would leapfrog across the stage using the mic stand. But so those points in time, this was back in the early 70s, I'm talking about. Those points in time when he'd break the mic stand like that, or something else would break down in the show, like an equipment breakdown, something. Well, that was the perfect time to call on me to play Whammer Jammer, because it's like got three choruses of nobody else had to play anything while they fix something pretty fast. I'm doing Whammer Jammer, and they don't all have to come in on Whammer Jammer until the third or fourth chorus, whatever it is. But then that evolved into it became so successful with the audience just loving Whammer Jammer, that we pretty much all the time put it as the second to last tune in the set. Now, this was a set. The sets we were doing back then were 2 hours long, 2 or more hours long.
Burners, you guys said it.
So that's a huge expenditure of energy before I even get to play Whammer Jammer.
Right. Yeah.
So by the time Whammer Jammer would come up, I would be pretty exhausted. Yeah. We were all exhausted. I mean, what it took to do what we did was unreal. Yeah. You know, it just it was relentless, you know. Yeah. So for me to even find a moment of rest, you know, I was always looking for those spots in the show where I could just relax, just let it, let it all, just relax, let it all go, you know. But this build up to when Whammer Jammer would come, we would go immediately from one of the intense barn burner things to Whammer Jammer.
Yeah.
So I'm already chugging like crazy on the end of this tune just before Whammer Jammer, and then have to do all the Whammer Jammer. Dying for air.
Yeah. Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of having had to do that and live through it and deliver it. And no matter what happened, that was it. You know, it was like I did the best I could every single time. You know, it's just like, and it's kind of related to that thing of me saying, you know, I'm probably going to be playing Whammer Jammer for the rest of my life. You know, it's not that I want to play it for the rest of my life, but somehow it has become this thing that I can't even imagine doing a show without putting Whammer Jammer in there somehow. Right. You know, even if it wasn't a rock show or whatever, you know.
Yeah. It's part of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to move. I'm working a lot on moving away from that, you know. By that, I don't mean to not perform it, to not do it. I'm just saying, I want something else. I'm working on something. I'm working on this bebop. I'm working on this jazz. And that means more to, and the ballads, that means more to me than anything. So to come full circle in this whole discussion, it's like, I figured out quite some time ago that I needed to take voice lessons. That changed me a lot. Well, the trumpet lessons really set, but you know, the trumpet in the beginning was addressing what I loved the most. Right. Then I fell into the harp playing and then got into the vocal, into the singing. But it was the singing that gave me the most as far as breath control. That gave real meaning about breath control to me. Because I think most of the time when people think of breath control, what they're thinking of is, well, man, with all these phrases and playing so fast, you must really have to work on your breath control. You know, that's sort of like the most obvious thing
Right.
to think about. You know, like
Mhm.
how fast can you crack that whip? You know, how much can you work your guitar? You know, all of that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but there's after a while you realize, especially when you're teaching and you're trying to get somebody to slow down, like I showed you before, slow down, count. I'm trying to transform the mind of the player. I'm trying to transform what they think about when they're practicing, how they direct their attention, so that it makes a difference. You know, continuing to just play along with records or just playing Chicago blues is not going to develop a player to be the best that they could be, because there's so much more to it. And you really have to slow down and listen and label. Labeling is wickedly important. It's very important for the brain. It's like if you learn to label the sound of an instrument, oh, that's a fourth. When you give it a label, you'll remember it. You'll remember it a lot better. You'll, oh, this is a thing. This is a fourth. This is a fifth. And there's different devices to help you remember these things. Like, do you hear what I hear?
Sure.
1 5 1 5. You
Yep.
know, think of this stuff. Remember, you know, because I see people, you know, like, okay, it's an interval of fifth, and they're like stuck. They're trying to think of like, let's see, what is a fifth in my head? You know, they don't know this memory device.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a device.
Mhm.
It's called your memory. You
Yeah.
need to use it. You know, you
Yes.
need to recognize the importance of every note.
Mhm.
I'm an every note kind of player. Now, which is not to say that I perform that well when I'm doing my stuff live, you know, but this is what I aspire to. This is what I aspire to when I practice, because this is really what's going to make the difference. And it's not like you can't just work on this stuff for a couple of weeks and then expect your next gig is going to be like transformed. You know,
Right.
this is like,
No, this is
this takes real sustained developing a habit of working this way.
yeah.
You know, get in the habit of putting a label on these intervals. It's the most important thing you can do. Otherwise, you're just a dumb harp player.
Love it.
Sorry.
Yeah. Right. I hear you. It's
You know, and nobody, take it from me, nobody wants to be the dumb harp player sitting in the corner of the room while the rest of the band is working on some shit. You know, they tell you, please don't play right now. We're working on this.
yeah.
You know, and you're wasting your time. All this time's going by. You're in the room. You can't really contribute in the way you might like to for a variety of reasons. One is you don't have your shit together enough to contribute to it from a theory chord structure point of view, or suggest a line or something, you know. So I learned to shut up and listen, you know, and then I'd have to take all that home with me and stay up all night, which is still a habit of mine, you know, of like, you know, get away from the TV, get away from everything that's distracting you and focus, you know. And then I would get better gradually from doing this. You know, this was over a long period of time. Then I really started to understand a lot more, and less fearful of chords. You
Yeah.
know, chords are only scary because you don't understand what's going on, but you can. You just decide to. You
Right.
know? It's that simple. You just decide to.
And you can go to YouTube and figure it out. Someone's there to show you for
Oh man, there's so much help on YouTube that's so great. Or ask somebody who knows more than you.
yeah.
You know.
Mhm.
But I'm telling you, what it's going to be a lot of is, and this is, you know, like I have people tell me, well, I'm not very good at math. This has nothing to do with arithmetic, has nothing to do with math. Can you count on your fingers?
Right.
Can you write down on a piece of paper, C, D, E, F, G, O, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can derive every single thing. You can be completely self-reliant. if you work from the definitions. What is the definition of a chord? How do you, what's the formula? Formulas. What is the formula for a major chord? What's the formula for a minor chord? What's the formula for a major scale, for a minor scale? This is not like brain crippling stuff here,
Yeah.
This is just deciding you're going to do it.
Yeah.
And then relate it to the instrument. Realize that your instrument, your diatonic harp, is set up very musically. It's like this instrument is set up to help you in some very significant ways, but it's also going to trip you up if you're interested in playing more than just blues. It's going to trip you up like crazy. And then you are going to have to get into some music theory and figure out, okay, how do you use this given structure of a conventional harp? How do you get out of this thing all the stuff that everybody's getting out of it? Right. And I don't mean Howard with the overblow approach. That's one thing. But just playing in general, it's like, I think one of the things that I'm known for, I'm mentioning this because a lot of people don't. Well, I developed a certain kind of style. I took the Chicago blues approach to the harp and my jazz influences, melded them together, and played in a rock band or a rock blues band, soul, R&B, all of that. There are very few players that have done what I have done in that regard of creating a language from the basic elements that went into the blues language. I've extended it and those techniques in a way that is convincing. It's like, this was influential on a lot of people. A lot of people are really influenced by me.
That's right.
For better or worse,
I think for the better.
I hope that doesn't sound too full of myself, but
no, I think
it's a fact.
Yes, it is a fact. It is a fact. I feel like you've given us so many pearls of wisdom today with how we others can get there too.
Yeah, it's not a secret. If there were a secret and I really felt the secret was important, I'd probably keep it a secret. But the secret is, I said this long ago, I realized it long ago, there's no secret. The only thing that guy is doing who sounds better than you is because he's further along in this stuff that I'm talking about with the ear training and hearing in your head. That's the most important thing, is hear that next note and know when it's wrong.
Right. Yes.
And you don't have to be music theoried to know this.
No.
You need to listen to a lot of music.
That's right. I feel like that's sort of
like When You Wish. This is a tune that I've been performing with Shun. We did this one. When You Wish Upon a Star is a great melody to play 12th position. In other words, like a C harp played in the key of F. It's played in a key a whole step below the cross harp key.
Yeah.
So it's like just a very brief example here. See, now maybe you could play some of that. I haven't tried yet. I was thinking about this when I was in bed this morning, thinking about maybe third position played major. You need to be able to play major to play this When You Wish Upon a Star.
Right.
And it just so happened I discovered, because I was looking for it, I want to play this melody and I want to play it with certain kind of expression. So I want it on a diatonic. How am I going to do? Well, somehow or other, I fell upon, oh man, this is that 12th position thing. I have a chart here that my friend Pierre, he wrote this out like a long time ago. I'm talking really long time, like late 70s, early 80s.
Wow.
This is just one. This is like a diagram. I'm not showing you this for you to pick up on the detail, but the idea is there's a diagram of the harp and all the possibilities that fall out of 12th position.
Right. Okay.
And so, I mean, you can do that with any position. But the best thing about doing that stuff is do it yourself. Figure this out. Don't just be looking for some chart that somebody else put together, you know, because when you do that, you're shortchanging your own brain of the calculations that need to be made in order for you to grow, you know. And while you're doing those calculations, you're transforming your brain to recognize pitch and to recognize pitch in singers or other instrumental players, to recognize when that tonality has the thing. If you were to make a list of all your idols, you know, the singers you love the most, the instrumentalists you love the most, particularly if you like ballad playing like me, you'll quickly realize that, you know, the ones that come out as like the best, the superior ones, they have this combination of incredible creativity to come up with original, beautiful lines, but they're totally taking care of business in the tonality department.
Yep.
You know,
Frank
Stevie Wonder, great tonality, great tonality in his chromatic harp playing, you know. Miles Davis in the earlier days,
he's like a perfect,
unbelievable tonality and sound, you know.
Right.
Just Miles's sound, the way he would sound when he was first playing with Charlie Parker. His trumpet sound was like this fat and with an edge to it. It was almost like I'm going to mislead people by saying it was almost like amplified harp in a way, because that's wrong. It's not that. It's more that he had an individual conception of, and it was very important to Miles what he sounded like. No other trumpet player sounded like Miles back then, you know, what he was doing. And no, he was struggling like crazy to keep up with Parker on these live gigs, you know. The tempos were extraordinary, you know, but it was his choice to deal with it, you know. He went to New York City and wanted to play with Charlie Parker, wanted to learn that music. And he just threw himself into the frying pan, you know.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
That's kind of been my approach too, is like, just go for it, you know, get beat up.
Yep.
And then you'll learn something, you know.
It's been my approach.
So I've had a lot of beaten up, and now I feel like I've come to some point of I understand the stuff enough to be consistent about what I'm working on every day. You know, I may have like, oh, this day I might work on like Cherokee. I have a handful of these different tunes I'm working on, and it's not like I'm trying to learn any one of them perfectly from beginning to end yet. That's not. If I choose to do that, if I want to focus on a single tune, I can and I will. But what I'm doing is I use these melodic fragments from these songs, and I find it really productive to use melodic fragments in practicing on the chromatic harp. You know, for example, one day I woke up not too long ago, I was watching Alfred Hitchcock's original Psycho, the original thing of Psycho, you know. And at one point, there's this bowed bass where she's escaping with the money. She's got the money. She's in her car. She's driving out on the highway, and it's starting to get dark, and it's raining out, and you know, you hear this. My point being that simple chromatic little phrase, you could practice that up and all over the harp. You know, it's not like, oh man, now I got to learn like a whole song. You can dive in right away
Mhm.
Hear an example of something from a movie. Hear something from a record, wherever it is. If there's some little riff that grabs you, play that riff on the chromatic, you know.
Mm-hmm.
This thing, it doesn't need to be this intimidating instrument.
Right.
It just needs to be something you start to get comfortable with
Mhm.
because you've now found a way to deal with it, you know.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
It's so simple. It's just a matter of, and there's no music theory involved. Yeah, I'm into the theory and all that, but this little thing I just showed you, there's no theory involved here at all, you know.
Using your
This
ear.
is just moving a little figure up and down on the instrument and realizing how valuable that will be to your dexterity, you know, and to your ear.
Mhm.
You start to hear this same riff played all over the place on the instrument. You go, yeah, now I'm starting to get a handle on this. Then make it into music. Just take that simple thing and put some expression to it, you know, or try it down lower. Like when I was first doing, I was doing on the 16-hole chromatic down at the bottom, you know. It's almost like that thing from Jaws. You know, um,
Very
those sorts of things are wickedly useful. Uh, so the concept of studying, of playing a chromatic, it doesn't need to be this. Oh God, that's just like that's just too much, man. No, get with it,
Michael.
fall in love with it. That's the thing is like when you put some effort into something, you're gonna love it more. Yeah, you may be frustrated with it at first and all that, you know, but like if you persist, keep it simple. I mean, like the simplest thing to practice is I'm not even doing it that great right now, but this one, two,
Yeah, sure.
get that right,
Good tone happening.
you know? It's
Yeah.
like that is not beneath anybody,
No.
you know. Could be an oboe player in the orchestra called on to play three beautiful, simple notes. You got to deliver those notes just right, you know. Don't complicate this stuff when you're working on it. Focus on the beginning. I've never been afraid to go back to, like, let's go back to Mary Had a Little Lamb, you know. That's a good piece. Should be coming around the mountain, you know, on top of Old Smoky, you know. But I made it even simpler than that by taking this little 3-note figure, 2 notes, you know.
Yeah.
Start getting on top of that. Anyway, I'm all wound up now, as I warned you I would be. You know.
Fantastic.
But it's like I love this stuff, man. It's like I sometimes feel a bit frustrated I feel like I'm good at expressing my enthusiasm about this, but I'm become more and more concerned that I don't want to lose people, and I want to make sure they understand exactly what I'm talking about. You
Mhm.
know, that none of this is beyond anyone
Mhm.
in no way, you know. And you must engage your voice and you must engage your mind if you want to be really
Right.
something. Now, that's not to say that those who don't aren't going to become any good. You know, it's possible to have a much more narrow focus on an instrument and be good at it. And that's okay,
Mhm.
you know. But you're talking to me about what I like and what I want to do. So I'm taking this wonderful opportunity to
I
just go nuts with
I mean, this
that.
is.
You know?
I'm excited that so many people are going to be able to see this, but in a sort of a selfish way, I feel like this was just the conversation I needed to have with someone. Actually, and to listen to you impart it to me, uh, in this particular manner, especially with the vocal thing, because I've been saying this forever. You know, that's part of the reason that I love the harmonica so much is it's such a vocal instrument.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
all of that implies, and you're taking it a step further and saying how important it is to be able to, how much it can help you if you use your vocalizations to to become a better player. I think.
Yeah. And at the same time that you're doing this, learn some music theory.
Yeah.
because even the first day of stuff you're studying with the music theory, you will start to play and sing these chords. Like when you're first studying a major scale and you sit at the piano, within a couple of minutes, you can be at the point of going, see, you set your fingers like this to play a basic chord, every other note. You just put your thumb on middle C there, C, E, G, B, E, G, B, D. A D, F, A, D, F, A, C. And you play it and hear it.
Mm-hmm.
You hear this. And then just start hitting some of these chords randomly. And you go, oh, I can make a song out of these chords right here.
Mm-hmm.
This is something right here.
Yeah.
You can go from almost any one of those chords to any other, and it all works.
Yeah.
And you sort of see why it's working, It's a great thing. It's really a great thing. Anybody who doesn't have a keyboard or a chord instrument, I highly recommend that they try to get something cheap, I think the keyboard is probably the best for this, but if you already play guitar and you're into looking at that and examining that might be good. That's not going to work for me because I can't do anything on guitar. I'd like to. Maybe someday I'll take some lessons or something, but
yeah. I think
one thing I do want to mention is I don't know if this is the appropriate moment to, but I love to teach. So any of you out there who think you might want to study with me, I love it. So contact me.
How can people get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Well, the most direct way to get in touch with me, if they want to jot this down, is magicdick.dick7@gmail.com. Great. I'll say it again. Magic Dick, which is like one word. magicdick.dick7@gmail.com.
I'll put that in the show notes.
They could go to my website. My website's kind of a mess right now because I never really fully developed it beyond, like, Shun and I started to do our thing. I completely revamped it for what I was doing with Shun. But Shun, I have a feeling that Shun and I aren't going to be doing this anymore because Shun got to a point where he wants to focus more on composing. Mm-hmm. That's his primary love. Not so much performing, some people just don't like, the road and performing, and if I had Shun skills as a composer, I'd probably feel the same way,
Yeah,
I get that,
Yeah. I need both. I think I need to be on stage and on the road a bit.
Like you were talking about with Mark Hummel not too long when you interviewed Mark, my friend Mark.
Yeah.
I just spaced out.
I'm sorry. I lost.
I hate when I do that, and then put it on you to like, oh geez,
No, you did bring up Mark Hummel, and oh geez.
Yeah, there was a reason why I brought up Mark. But I don't remember right now, so rather than force it,
I know, I'm sorry.
But Mark and I have become really good friends, and we've worked together a lot over several decades.
He's a cool dude.
Well, he's amazing because his whole contribution to he's worked with so many people, knows so many people in the blues world that I think he's unique in that regard,
Yeah. I love the blowout. You've been a part of his blowout, right?
Yeah, numerous times. And usually the ones I would do with Mark would often include Lee Oscar, Jerry Portnoy.
Love Jerry.
There's certain aggregations that Mark would put together because it just works both in terms of location, and we just all get along great.
All of that stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a skill to have as well, being able to put the right people.
Yeah. Yeah. How long have we been? How long have I been yakking at you?
We've been at 2.5 hours.
Nice.
Yeah, that's great. This is like a real podcast length. I typically do, well, it depends. Like guys like yourself. I know I spoke with Howard for at least, well, about 2 hours, maybe a little bit more. Curtis Salgado, who I love as a vocalist and a harp player,
Yeah.
for 2.5 hours. So this is some folks, it's an hour.
Yeah.
Some folks have been 45 minutes.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, this amount of time we've gone. This is usually about the amount of time I go on a lesson.
really.
Yeah. Now maybe that's too long for a lesson. I don't know.
I mean, how much can you can glean a lot from this amount of time? I mean, I feel like I've learned a lot just by listening, just to how I plan to approach the harmonica and learn and
Yeah.
singing stuff. Just hearing you.
Well, the way we've been talking about this is somewhat easier to follow because it's much more devoid of detail that would be in a lesson.
Mhm.
You know, in a lesson where I'm explaining something about, say, the theory or the chords that come out of the major scale, etc., like we talked about. That's when I have to work a lot harder because harp players are not used to thinking like that unless they're like a keyboard player or guitar.
Mhm.
They don't seem to have the background, and therefore they form certain habits. They have an inclination to not think.
Mhm.
And in fact, some people elevate this thing of not thinking to some kind of thing to aspire to the most. I think aspiring to not thinking in the moment when you're performing, when you're playing, that's good. But to practice in that manner, it's okay to practice part of your time that way, but you need to practice with real deliberateness if you're going to master these things that you aren't mastered on yet. You know, and like the music theory is just so full of potential. That's the thing I want to get maybe the most across to people is like those people who poo-poo, theory and oh, I don't know anything about chords. You don't need to know anything about chords to play this. Well, sorry, but if you don't learn some of this other stuff, you're going to be very restricted in what you think of to play, what you hear in your head, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be playing what everybody else plays.
Yep.
You know,
Agreed.
it's hard to get away from that. As harp players, we copy other players, we have our idols, we copy them.
Yeah.
But if you want to be an artist, I think of myself as an artist. That's my job is to be an artist. First and foremost, I guess I'm an entertainer, but I'm interested in being an artist about it,
Yeah.
And that's separate in a sense from being a performer. Although being a performer involves a lot of artistry, I'm talking more in the broad sense of the type of musical expression that what do you have to say and how are you going to say it?
Right.
How are you going to be something unique without just playing weird?
Right. Uh-huh.
It needs to be pleasing to the ear. It needs to be something that people want to hear,
Yes.
And so I think the best way to do that is to open your mind and your playing ability to all the possibilities that are inherent in the chords you're playing to. In other words, you don't like when Charlie Parker came along, nobody played like that, nobody sounded like this guy.
Yeah.
And it was because of a combination of his rhythmic approach which was fantastic and really flexible, to where he could put his phrases. But his harmonic conception, his understanding of the chords, the scales that work with these chords. Now already people are like freaking out and turning off. Scales, chords, shit, just shut up, They don't want to know they're deficient in this way. The key to happiness, I swear, the key to happiness is to embrace that you're not as good as you think you are. That's the most important thing.
Mhm.
You're not there yet. I'm talking about everybody.
Right.
When you have this in your head, then you have opened the door to you working on the stuff you need to do.
Yes.
Because then there's no longer this voice of like, don't do that, Rich. Come on, Rich. Just play this too. Don't work on that crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is it. It's like, get down to it. Be committed. Have something to say. But, and again, I try embrace this thing of you're nowhere near as good as you think you are. I don't care what level you're at. It's psychology. If you put this much work into working on something, you're going to think you're pretty good. It's human nature, Man, I've been busting my ass at this. I'm probably getting better at it than I used to be. Well, not necessarily,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you have to bring yourself to this point. You have to carry yourself to this point of like, I'm nowhere near as good as I thought I was. What does that mean? What do you do about that? You get down to the fundamentals. Bum, 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 right there. And just singing, arpeggiating a chord is a practice thing that you can do that reinforces the pitches in your ear and gets you working on the correct breath control. It's that simple.
That's it, man.
You don't need pages and pages of how to play, This is the music lesson. It's just like, it's so friggin' important because this is the thing that will develop you as a musician and actually make you be a musician.
Right. Yes, I do know. Mm-hmm.
If you can't listen to somebody play a riff and immediately be able to sing it back, something's missing.
Yes, right.
Unless they're playing something so fast, it's like, what was that again? Yeah, that can happen, of course,
Yeah.
But all of these, the melodies, this whole language that permeates music, we all borrow from the same well, and the well is deep. So learn the language of music and the sound of music. Learn what it means to sound good. Don't think just because you made it through a piece that you're good. No, you're not. You're not as good as you think you are. It's my motto. Sounds like a very negative thing, but it's not, because it gives you permission to then go back to the very beginning and fix it. Everybody can do this, but it requires a certain attitude and a certain degree of patience. And you have to love yourself enough to and believe in yourself enough, like Howard believed in what he was doing, that you're going to make changes. You're going to improve, but only to the extent that you've awakened your mind and your observations. Mm-hmm. You have to look and listen and think. By think, I don't mean just think, let's see, the three, the 5 of the 3 is the flat 7 of the blah. Yeah, that's going to come to you eventually. No, I mean think in terms of play a little figure when you're practicing. Play a little figure. Stop. Evaluate it. Listen to it. Maybe record it. Think about it some more and analyze what's wrong with what you just did. If you can't figure out what's wrong with it, then get some lessons. Or change the way you're thinking about it. I think what would be a breakthrough for a lot of players is this thing I'm talking about with singing and the basics of the breath control. There is nothing else. Yeah. It's the secret. I guess I'm at the end of what I could say about it. It's just like play. That's the other thing that happens with a lot of players is like, I can be one of these people, say, who spends a lot of time on the music theory and wants to dig deeper and deeper. The deeper I go, the more I realize I'm grasping this and what I could do with it. I had a point and I lost it. I'm so sorry.
No,
it's this thing of the notes. Think about the notes or note. You know, like Little Walter, for example. An epiphany that I had about this stuff came to me within the past year or two about vowel sounds. Most people who play Little Walter type stuff, including me for quite a while, there's a one-dimensional approach to the sound of Little Walter. You see most harp players, they grab the mic and the harp, got a pretty tight cup going on the thing, and they're just always on this. And it's not even a matter of whether they're closed or open. There's all that. I'm talking about the vowel sounds that are created inside your mouth. Ah, eh, e, o, u. Those are the things that Little Walter uses in his phrases, where he'll change these vowel sounds or end a phrase on a particular vowel sound. And if you copy that phrase and don't put that vowel in there, you can hear something's wrong. You know, you might not be hip to it at first. Man, I got all the right notes here. What's going on? You know, well, you're not picking up on enough of the detail. And what that means, the implication of having to produce these different vowel sounds means that you got to work a lot more on technique. If you've been playing all your life, all this time with just give me the harp and I'll just blow, you know, that's not paying any attention to all this stuff about the vowel sounds and how important vowel sounds are for vocal communication, for sound communication. You know, to mimic speech. Mimicking speech means taking into account the vowel sounds, not just whether you're open or closed with your hands, you know?
Yeah.
And all this thing about articulations, you know, how much do you tongue? How much do you attack notes? How do you do that? Man, there's just tons. There's just so much to that. And it's so easy to overdo articulations, you know? I've gone through this thing where I've gone way too far to hammering on a note, you know, like pecking away at notes, when there's a much smoother way that can give a better sound, a better tone, but it requires a little more of a refined technique. You know? Most of us take the sledgehammer approach, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. The older
I literally take the sledgehammer to some of the harps. When they die, you know, when a harp dies, I would, in the old days, I would often destroy it just so that it wouldn't by mistake get back into the playable collection, you know, and screw me up really completely. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Looking back, you probably could have sold those for a ton. old Magic Big harps, you know. Oh man.
Oh man, I've gone through so many, and then I used to toss them out to the crowd. I quit doing that for a couple of reasons. One, because people started throwing things at concerts, throwing things at the stage. That didn't necessarily mean that they didn't like you.
Yeah.
Is it just that's what people were doing? It'd be like, come on, man.
Yeah, I've seen that too. Yeah.
This isn't good, you know.
Not good. No. I used to throw harps out into the audience. If I would have one that was blowing out, I knew it was going to go soon. When it went, I was okay with tossing it out. But I stopped doing that because, you know, I tried to give it a nice loft so people could see. Here it comes.
Yeah.
look out, here it comes. Yeah, and I got a call from a friend, and he said, "Hey, I'm sitting here with the girl who caught your harmonica at the show last night. She caught it right between the eyes."
Oh,
Like, oh no.
yeah. See that? There you go. That's the other reason to not do it.
Yeah. So
It's
it can be a dangerous weapon. Right.
just too dangerous, you know.
She didn't mind. She was glad to have the harp, but someone else, it might have been a different scenario. But anyway.
Yeah.
Well, man, this has been a monumental day for me to hang out with you, talk about, listen to you, talk about all
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you so. That really makes me feel good. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it because I love being able to have an effect like on you. You know.
Well, it did. I feel
I'm also aware that all the shit I talk about with some people just doesn't connect. You know.
right. Oh, I felt
Whatever.
today the opposite. I felt like in so many things that you touched upon that you were talking directly to me, and I know you weren't.
Well, I am talking directly to every harp player.
Yeah,
You know.
it's yes. No,
Um.
I knew that. I know that, but I mean, I just felt like I needed to hear some of these things that you had to say, especially with my background as a singer. I can relate.
Yeah.
You're saying. Hmm.
Singing is transformative. When I started singing, I had very little confidence.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I really started studying it in earnest. I was one of these people, as far as I'm concerned, I I needed help.
Hmm.
You know, I could sing naturally pretty well, but it doesn't mean that I sounded that good. I got a lot better by bringing a disciplined approach to improving it. You know, this woman that I studied with, my voice coach, her name was Jeannie Diva. Unfortunately, Jeannie passed away about 3 or 4 years ago, and I was very sad to hear that. I wasn't aware that she had left us, and but over the years, I have told people about her and what I learned from her. I've talked about it a lot, even given like seminars to about uh, how to breathe that I learned from her, and the technique that she taught is basically the foundation for what's called sort of bel canto kind of singing, or meaning uh, all singers use this technique, whether they're opera or powerful pop or rock singers. It's this thing of singing from the diaphragm,
Hmm.
singing with the lower part of the back of your rib cage. Your lower back expands, and you keep it that way for the whole time that you're singing a song. So what I learned from her about this breathing and how to set up the breath, um, I realized, well, man, this makes the harp playing even better.
Hmm.
When I approach playing the harp, exactly the same way, use the rib cage expansion, not the front of the chest. It's not about a He-Man kind of. It's not about that at all. It's totally different. If this is the back lower part of your rib cage, you learn to expand this by taking a breath. Your stomach kind of goes forward.
Hmm.
You take in a deep breath, your diaphragm flattens out, it draws all the air fills your lungs. It's what you do when you're going to use the air to produce vocal sound. That's where these techniques come in. And that's where the vocal exercises really helped me. And the idea of translating this way of breathing to playing the harp. It's like, oh, if I produce this tone, any note on the harp, the same way as if I'm about to sing this pitch, that's where the magic is. That's what the secret is.
Yeah.
But now, again, I don't mean to imply that's what the secret's going to be for everybody. I can only speak about this is what works for me, but I've studied this stuff both scientifically and unscientifically, where you put yourself in the hands of a trainer, you
Mhm.
know, a vocal coach. You know, there's not that much study of science about it, but there are these methods and techniques, and they're very effective, you know. So I learned a great deal from Jeannie by her teaching me this approach. And it's what gave me the discipline to work on, to be able to work day after day leading up to a gig, you know, so that your voice is, you know, I'm getting up there to sing. I want to sing well. I want to sound good, you know. No longer is it okay to just, I'll just take care of my harp playing, the rest of it, just wing it.
Right.
You know, that doesn't work for me anymore. There was a day long ago when I would do that. And that's when you'd hear the recording and go, I don't ever want to sound like that again. You know,
it's the worst.
I've heard my harp like that too. You know, I've gone through periods where like, man, I don't like the way this is sounding, you know.
Mm-hmm.
What am I, you know, what's going on here, you know?
Totally.
And with me, it's been doubly complicated because I am both a tongue blocker and lip person. And for several years now, I practice both ways and go readily. Like when I'm practicing, I'll practice a riff one way and practice it the other way. Make careful observations of what seems to work better.
Mm-hmm.
I've come to a recent conclusion, maybe you'll be interested in this, that on the chromatic harp, I've done a lot of lip pursing on the chromatic harp. And then I've gone back to the tongue blocking. I'm talking about tongue block. I'm talking about playing single notes.
Right.
And I find that the note connections that you get when you play lines with tongue blocking are much more even and smooth. And part of the reason for that is when you use tongue blocking, your embouchure isn't being sucked in as much, isn't being closed up as much,
mm-hmm.
in the aperture. You know, like let's say you play, if you're tongue blocker, you play out of the right side, you know. So playing single notes that way, when you play a draw note, you create a vacuum. When you're lip pursing, that vacuum causes your aperture in your lips to want to shrink down to a smaller size.
Right.
For better or for worse.
Yeah.
Usually sort of for the worse, because there's a particular sound that's kind of associated, at least for me, when I'm lip pursing, that's one sound. When I'm tongue blocking, that's another kind of tone altogether. Right. A fatter, bigger, deeper thing, but without as much color and variance to it. And with tongue blocking, you're a lot more hampered in your articulations. You know, if you need to tongue certain things, like, you know, or draw mm-hmm. tonguing, like punching, you know, hard attacks. You need to sort out which way you're going to use, or be aware that they're not equivalent. You know, this talk about which is better, you know, tongue blocking or lip pursing, they're different, and they're different on the diatonic and the chromatic.
Right on.
And then there are other things too. You know, some guys use this U-tongue thing.
Right.
You know,
I heard of that too.
You know,
mm-hmm.
And other approaches. You know, I'm less interested in all that than I am in the breath control, because I've come to the point where I know that if the breath control isn't right, everything else being okay and equal, if the breath control isn't there, your sound's not there.
Right.
It's just not, you're just not going to get what you want.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think I probably said it way too many times, but I hope that those people who are still with us, you know, and who don't like to think,
mm-hmm.
I hope that they will think enough about this to change the way they practice.
Mm-hmm. I, for one, am going to get on that board. That
Thanks.
Yeah.
And I'd be glad to talk to you, you know, anytime further you want to talk more about this stuff, I love talking about it because, you know, one of the things about teaching is it reinforces for the teacher and expands the teacher's mind as much as the student.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true.
It just does, you know,
Yeah.
regardless of where the student is at. When you have to explain something and get someone to, you're trying to get them to do something that actually may be very simple, yet it's hard for them because they're creatures of a lot of bad habits. All these bad habits that have built up, you know, since day one.
Mhm.
I try to address those bad habits. I've gone through it with myself.
Mhm.
And when you get right down to it, the final choice of technique is, are you producing a warm tone? Are you using enough air that you bring the normally too sharp of a pitch down to concert pitch?
Mhm.
On a chromatic harp, if you play very lightly on a chromatic and on a diatonic, the pitch is rather sharp. It's only when you give enough air to expand the tone, you know, so that the bottom of the sound, the depth of the bottom starts to come out. Well, it's that depth. When you get the right amount of air, it pulls the pitch down from being sharp. It centers the tone. It gives you a beautiful tone. And you just have to learn to hit. That's why practicing single notes. Take the time to focus on one note, produce a good note. Notice where in the too sharp to too flat, like where is the center of the pitch? Then practice playing multiple times that note. Bum, bum, bum. And each time you do that, don't get mentally lapsed and start playing too light where you're playing sharp. You know, a lot of times people will practice extensively. They want to be quiet. They don't want to wake up their roommate or whatever, you know. When you start playing really light on the harp, you're playing sharp. And watch out for this, because I don't mean to play so hard that then suddenly you're gonna be flat.
Right. Yeah.
My point is that you will find that the sweet tone, no vibrato, just, you don't need vibrato. The sweet tone comes from the right amount of air and getting the pitch right.
Mhm.
When you have the sweet tone, the pitch is right. Those two go together. It's like, that's your test. That's your check. Like, you know, people wonder, well, how do I? It's what I just said, you know. It's this recognition that you can play the harp sharp or you can play it flat. I'm talking about the tendency of its pitch. You don't want to play it sharp. If you play too light, you're going to be sharp. So practice playing in tune. How do you do that? Hey, get a tuner.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm. Yeah.
put on a tuner and observe. If you play really light, you're going to be about 14 cents sharp. That's a lot,
Yeah.
you know.
Mhm.
Play it in pitch, and then you will discover how much air do you need, and listen to the quality of the sound. You want a warm sound that shows in pitch on the tuner.
Yep.
That's how to blow.
Yeah.
Makes a huge difference, especially if you're playing ballads, because ballads are perfectly revelatory of everything wrong with your playing.
Yes, you're right. It reveals everything. Mhm.
It does.
Yeah.
That's why I urge everyone, play ballads. Get away from this constant Chicago blues playing. Get away from the constant imitating of Sonny Boy or this guy or Jason. I love Jason, you know, and Jason brings a lot to the table. I love this guy, you know.
Mhm.
But what I'm talking about, and Jason is very influential on other players. A lot of people like him.
Oh, yeah.
That's all great, but I don't know that Jason sits down and plays ballads, you know. There's so many players that won't do this. You know, maybe they don't have the ear for it or the love of it, you know. But I love all these jazz singers that sing ballads, you know.
Mhm.
So maybe that's, you know, maybe that's what it takes, is it just takes love.
The Beatles said
What
it.
does it mean to love? What does it mean to love something? You know, it's like what it means in music is to pay a real close attention to the details, find out why it matters to you, and then use this to change how you practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to put in all this time practicing and actually not make much more of a change to your playing other than your facility to get around on the instrument.
Right. Right.
That's what everybody is after, is that they want some fluency.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Guilty of that. Sure.
there's plenty of guys that can play like fast and wide and all over the place, you know, but I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
I want to hear some singing. I want to hear singing on the harp. I want to hear the harp like a voice, you know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want to hear music that uses lines that are vocal lines, whether they're played by a horn or not. The best sounding shit is stuff that's like the voice.
That's right.
It's just the way we are built as listeners, you know.
Sure.
Yeah. So I've really I've stepped into my pleading mode. You know, I beg everybody, you know, come on, you guys and girls, you know.
Yeah.
Now, people are getting better. You know, there's just so many harp players. You know, when I started, there was hardly anybody.
Yeah. I mean,
there was almost nobody around, you know.
no YouTube. And
well, now, yeah, but back then when I started, you know, in
it was records, right?
68, 69, there was not even computers.
Right. Sure.
I'm real old school. Like me and Kim Wilson remember the day when with the record player and the tone arm, and you know.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. And that was fun, actually, in a way, you know.
Yeah.
And then along came the cassettes, and the cassettes made it much easier to do a quick review on a riff.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Instead of picking the needle up.
Let it play, and hit the rewind thing while it's playing.
Yeah.
You know, zoop,
I did that.
you know.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Better believe it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, man, this has been a wonderful.
I've had a really fantastic time talking to you about this stuff.
Me too. Let's do it again sometime. What do you say?
Sure. You know, I was a little apprehensive before we started. Not because of anything to do with you whatsoever. It's just that's the way I am. I just, you know, when I know that the spotlight is going to be on me, and I'm going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And this doesn't always go great. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times, like if there were a third person in this conversation, I don't think any of this would be as clear.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Yeah.
It's helpful to me to have this just be one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Right on. I'm glad I could give you the sort of the format of a allow you to be able.
And the reason I say this is because that way, by having it be like this one-on-one thing, I'm not distracted by another injected idea, you know. So this has been great.
Awesome.
Thanks. I really enjoyed it, and it gives me great pleasure to see that you've been affected by this conversation. And you know, for me, I'll just get back to do re mi. You know,
I think I need to go back to that as well after listening,
you know,
having this conversation.
But then I go from do re mi into, you know, now you notice I know how to sing this stuff. You see, it's like, learn to sing what you decided you're going to play.
Right. I'm into that. I do that for sure.
Yeah, even if you're not singing the tune in a show, you know what I mean? It's like, spend some time singing every single thing you play. Now, some things it's very hard to do that, like singing Whammer Jammer, for example. There's so much going on in here with this rhythm and chords. It's like all you can really sing is like the top part of it, that what emerges as a melody, you know, you know. But there's a lot more going on there than just that, you know. But the vocalizing part of it, it's like all the stuff with the tongue, you know. That's a break in Whammer Jammer. Then harp technique, no, it's limericks. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. This is the shit to practice. I'm serious. You know,
right.
You got to get the tongue, like, the tongue has to be limber. Rhythmic exercises for the tongue and vocalizing for the tongue. These are like the best things, you know. And realize that these sort of simple things, these are your friends. This is what you come back to every day when you get confused. If you don't know, you know, if you want to get centered again, center on singing this riff and make sure you grasp it from many different points of view. And don't let the opportunity of the growth in technique, don't lose that. It's way too easy to practice stuff and not get to that.
Yes.
For decades.
Yeah.
We all do this, you know. We all want to show what we can do, you know. Oh man, check out this. I learned this too, you know. Nice. But like Lester Young said, yeah, but can you sing me a song? You know?
Right on.
And that's how long ago I became convinced that singing was like the one thing that I put off for like so long, you know. I never conceived that, hey man, maybe you ought to think about, you actually could take some lessons, you know. I remember coming from a school of thought that was like negative on lessons, you know, like,
sure,
if you think about some of your favorite singers, you probably go, well, Muddy never had no lessons, you know.
right.
Did Little Walter have any singing lessons? Well, I don't know, but they had plenty of lessons in the church, you know. They were surrounded since they were children. They were surrounded by vocalisms, you know. So for them, this was like primal actions, you know. It's just life, you know. Like Victor Wooten being brought up with his older brothers, you know. At 1 and 2 years old, he could fool around with the bass. Nobody cared. Nobody tried to show him anything, you know. He didn't need to be shown anything. It's just like you don't teach, like he talks about this a lot. And I think there's a lot to this. It's like, you don't teach children how to talk. They just try it, you know, throw it around, and they get better and better at it, you know. It's not like they're taking lessons, you know, or you're even consciously trying to teach them. They just do it, you know. Well, you have that advantage when you're starting that young on an instrument. You don't really have the intellectual capacity to think like a music theory or anything like that, you know. You just do, and you immediately associate actions with sound. And that's what I want harp players to do when they're working on stuff, is like, if you have a musical conception, this thing of getting it to directly come out of your instrument, it's not just a matter of these are the notes. You have to conceive of it in its totality, like phrasing, you know, sound, tone, the vowel sounds. There's such a big picture to all this at once that if you're deficient in any of them, then you're not a master. And there's no point in deceiving yourself. Like I said before, you're nowhere near as good as you think you are, because you put all this effort into it. You know, God forbid, how can I put that much effort into something,
Right.
and it's not good?
Yeah.
You know,
Right. Yeah.
it's the thing. You know, but boy, is it liberating to come to that point of view. Then you no longer care about whether you're good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
Good or bad has nothing to do with it anymore. What really has to do with it is, are you taking the correct actions?
Yeah.
When you pick up to play or to sing, at the moment of making that sound, are you doing the right actions? It's like the sound is the direct result of the actions you take. All of us, all of us players.
Mm-hmm.
That's why one guy sounds different from another, from a very fundamental point of view, or one person's speaking, everything from the sound of their voice, you know, the voice imprint of their sound, their voice, and how they use it, what they do with it. The big difference is musicians are learning how to use the brain in conscious ways to develop it. Now, real good public speakers, you know, people who are good at it, they study doing this too, as if it were like an instrument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's amazing what a methodical, logical approach can accomplish for harp players. It just takes the humility to recognize you're not as good as you think you are. I can't say it enough, you know, because it's only until once you get to that point, then you've cleared the way for you to do anything you deem you or someone else might suggest to you would be something good for you to work on, you know. Otherwise, you're all wrapped up in protective ego. Yet the ego is a really necessary if you don't have an ego, there's no sound.
Mm-hmm.
You have nothing to say.
Yeah.
You know. Now, you can either have something you say by expressing something in words, or you have something to say by making certain sounds and putting them in rhythm. But without the ego, there's no desire to do it. You know, we all have to have this ego, yet it's the ego which gets in the way of your improvement.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
Right, man. You're so right. You could also be a shrink. You could be a shrink for musicians for sure.
I am.
I love it. I feel like you jumped into my brain today. So many topics. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I've probably worn you out, you know, for which if that's true, I apologize.
No, you have not.
I know I can be very intense with this, and I can go on forever. You know.
Well, I love it. I'm gonna take you up on that because I want to do that. I say this to all of my guests, and I always mean it. But I want to say it to you as well. Let's do this again.
Yeah, thanks.
Because there's still a lot to talk about. You know. I mean.
Yeah, and I'm still working on my teaching concepts, and it seems like every time I take on a new student, you know, there's a new twist to it, or something else to recognize, you know. And even this difference in age, you know, like it's funny, like one of my students is like 13. Okay. He's like a whiz kid. But like wasn't until I actually started to really work with him and say, okay, Mike, you know, I want to hear you sing this, do that. These are simple things, you know. And it's like that's where you see the crack in the thinking. That's where you notice that a disconnection between the action and the mind. You know, the mind is the boss. Your body will do it. Well, this is one thing I learned from the singing. When you study singing properly, when you study all of this the right way, the mind is what takes care of business.
Right.
Automatically.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to tell your mind how to sing. Your mind knows how to sing.
Mm-hmm.
Your mind knows how to sing in tune. The mind is so powerful. And to the extent, it's only sort of to the extent of the awareness you bring to your mind. Like, how aware are you of all the elements that go into, okay, I'm about to make a sound right now. Is your body properly set up to make that sound you expect to hear come out? Probably not.
Right.
This is what, this is what you work on this stuff for, is to get to that point of the bodily preparation for the sound.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, when I set up to play, I incorporate all that stuff I learned from GED, all that stuff with the rib cage expand. Get set up, get ready. Or it's like if you're taking trumpet lessons, teacher will put some sheet music down in front of you. They'll say, okay, look it over. It gives you about 10 seconds at the most to look it over.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, count off and go. That's, to me, what a real lesson is, okay, I'm counting. One, I got to count it off. 1, 2, hit it, And more often than not, the teacher will stop you after like 2 or 3 notes.
Yeah.
Because you must address what you're not supporting or what you're not doing right. Because if you don't, then that just keeps getting reincorporated into shit you're doing wrong. Now we've all been playing wrong for decades and loved it.
I loved it.
Now it's time to get better. Let's fix some of the shit that's wrong with harp players, including the ability to be so fucking obnoxious. Excuse me.
I love it. Yeah. I do know. Yeah. I think we all are aware. Some of us just can't help ourselves. I say ourselves.
Yeah.
Inclusive, but yes, I agree. I agree.
Well, I want to thank you so much for asking me great questions and responding so nicely to nicely is actually not the word I meant to use, but you have been really nice about it, but interestedly as you are, and seeing how this applies to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything that I've said between you and me, I would direct this at every harp player. I don't care how good they are. They're not good enough. How's that?
How's that? I freaking love it. Magic Dick, everyone. I love it. Dude, thank you so much for this time together. This was really wonderful. We got to do it again. And before we leave, one more time, where can people can find your stuff on your website? But also, if they want to get in touch with you for lessons and such, the best way is your email address, which is magicdick.dick7
yep.
@gmail.com.
At gmail.com.
There it is.
You got it.
Right on, dude.
I'm looking forward to hearing from anybody. One thing I do want to say is I'm one of these people that finds, Facebook and all of that to be a dual-edged sword. You can learn a lot from what's on Facebook and especially YouTube, but it's also, once you get involved with the Facebook thing, it's very demanding on your time. And there are plenty of times when I pull away from it and just find it to be a royal pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And yet that's not really what I think of it. It's just, I don't have all this much time. I need to play more. I need to practice more. And it's like the most fundamental thing you could realize is, hey, maybe you're not practicing enough, man. Mm-hmm. Even people who think they're working on it. No, they're not working on it enough. you know.
Yeah.
For some people, 5 or 10 minutes a day, that's all they want to do, and they're happy, and that's fine. But if you're really serious about your playing, I suggest more like 2, 3, 4, 5 hours a day, maybe not all at once. But if you want to get really good, you got to have this thing in your mouth practically all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to the extent that you lay off, you're going to pay for laying off.
I know, man. I mean, yeah. I mean, my chops.
And then you kick yourself in the ass. You go, damn, why did I let this happen?
Yeah.
Being
off the road.
Love is it.
And love is
everything. Love's the answer. Love the instrument, love the music, and love the fact that you can accept that you're not very good yet. Yeah.
Right.
Is the operative word.
Well,
I find if I have an attitude, I feel better about everything. I don't have to feel I'm great. I need to feel that I'm working on what's going to make it better.
Yes.
And allow me to play the jazz that I want to play. And the rest of it, it's all fun. And the moment it's not, well, I don't have a good answer for what to do, and it's not fun except take a break.
Mm-hmm.
You can get so serious about this stuff and frustrated that, well, that's where a good teacher can help. It's like, hey man, lighten up on yourself, and like a lot of the heaviness and all that comes from being driven hard, but lacking clarity in how to do it and how to get there. It's that combination of wanting so bad and frustration. You don't need to be frustrated. You need to work on the right thing. Substitute work for frustration.
Yeah.
God, if I were to follow all my own advice, I'd be really just doing awesome.
You definitely need to write a book, that's for sure. You definitely need to.
What's that?
You definitely need to write a book about this stuff.
I've thought about some of that, or thought about doing like I'd like to do more stuff online. But getting started on this for me has been really hard. Like I thought, well, just start doing some stuff on Facebook, Facebook Live from my basement.
Right.
Just me talking about harp and demonstrating a few things. But I don't know, somehow that feels like pressure to me. I don't really know I don't know how to like begin. I'd be open to anything you might suggest to me to get started in that way.
Uh-huh.
I've got my own YouTube channel. I've never posted anything to it.
No, we got to fix that. You got to fix that. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the advice I would say is to take your own advice and go back to some of the more rudimentary things that, you want to impart.
Yeah.
Start there.
Oh, I find also a lot of that stuff when you're going to explain, like a verbal explanation is one thing, but you need to show, you need to do, it's like this, right. And that part scares me, because then that's a performance thing, yeah. That suddenly puts you into the realm and the fear of performance art. It's hard to be relaxed under those conditions for me, because I think everybody's going to judge me.
Yeah, I can relate to that as well. I think we all relate to that. It's something you just get over, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So everyone, make sure you go to Magic Dick's Facebook page and annoy him there, because he wants to
I haven't posted anything to Facebook in a long time.
I'm joking. Don't do
but
that.
I look at it.
But you can go to his email him and get in touch with him and
yeah,
for some private lessons and some great insight onto all things music, and there's a lot to learn here, a lot to uncover. So, man,
thanks.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to email you. I'm going to hope maybe you can teach me something. If I'm teachable, we'll see.
But I'm into teaching and I'm into all that. But sometimes what happens is, you get these things start building up. I'm kind of a procrastinator that way, you know.
Yeah.
And before you know it, it's like, oh man, it's just too much, you
Yeah.
know.
I hear you.
Especially for somebody who all I want to do is get down to it with the practicing, you know.
Yeah.
Really want to make progress every day, you know. And with these attitudes that I've explained to you, you can.
Get
You
down.
can.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also it helps you with this thing of like not crossing off a day every day on everything on the calendar, you know. Forget the calendar, you know.
Mhm.
Forget how long this is going to take. You have no idea how long. Each individual has no idea how long it's going to take until they transform their brain into knowing how to think musically, you know.
Right.
Pay attention to the sound of an interval, memorize the sounds of the intervals. And if you're a chromatic harp player, I highly recommend that you learn to spell chords. CEG, DFA, you know.
I mean, that's easy. That's anybody can do that. That's just a this is how it's done. Now go. Now do it. Oh, okay.
This is a memorizing thing to some considerable extent. It's like memorize this shit.
Mhm.
No, the D F sharp A is D major.
Right.
You know, it's like know this.
Mhm.
Now, that's not going to appeal to a lot of diatonic players because they just switch key harps and they think they're cool. You know, but if you're a chromatic player, think of your instrument as like a trumpet or a sax.
Mhm.
Learn to play that thing in every damn key.
Mhm.
You learn to work on it to a point of like, I don't give a damn what key something's in. Makes no difference.
Yeah.
You should be that good at it. Makes no difference.
Mhm.
Yeah, ultimately it makes a difference. Like you come to a certain riff that might be hard to execute fast in a certain key because it's awkward, you know, certain awkward motions.
Right.
Just think of going from blow to draw quickly or from a draw to a blow the next cavity up. You know, these little dance steps, these moves
Mhm.
um, need to be practiced slowly and with precision. That's the beauty of practicing slowly is you can bring the necessary precision uh, to it. Practice playing in such a way that you're not reinforcing practice, that you're not practicing mistakes.
Yeah.
It's a tricky thing,
Right.
you
Right.
know.
That's very true. Mhm.
Yeah. All right.
Hard
I
to
should let you go.
okay. Right on to
Sorry.
no, this was fantastic. I'm so grateful that you did this. Thank you so much. And this,
I'm glad I did it too. Thanks, Jamie.
yeah. Well, we're gonna do it again. So, that's
Anytime, man. All right.
right on, brother. Peace and love to you. Stay well,
Same to you, man.
and